The Throne of the Mechas. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 801, Deteriorated Dream. Xia Xingchen opened the car door, got off the hovercraft, looked up at the blue mecha that was close at hand, and said coldly, "Who are you? Why are you massacring civilians?" Xia Xingchen's chest seemed to be burning fiercely. Along the way, Xia Xingchen did not see robots slaughtering humans, but he saw his compatriots killing people for fun. What made people most angry was that the murderers were two mecha masters. Mecha masters are a glorious term and a glorious profession in human society. There is no teenager who does not dream of driving a huge and handsome mecha, traveling in the sea of stars, and fighting to protect humans. This was also Xia Xingchen's dream when he was a teenager. In theory, Xia Xingchen's dream has come true at this moment. However, Xia Xingchen was shocked to find that his boyhood dream had deteriorated unknowingly. The more Xia Xingchen came into contact with the profession of mecha masters, the more he discovered that mecha masters are also people with 7 emotions and 6 desires. There are good people like Popovich who are willing to help others. Of course, there are also ruthless villains, like the 2 mecha masters in front of him. You dare to stand up and are not afraid of us? Oljika was slightly startled and seemed a little surprised, but he soon laughed sinisterly. You must be a spy sent by the Galactic Empire. Just like the 3 people in the car just now. I ask again, as a mecha master, why do you kill unarmed civilians? Xia Xingchen's voice became colder. Are you questioning me? But I'm in a good mood. Before killing you, I'll talk to you a little more. Why do I kill civilians? Haha, this is the cruel war. Oljika's face showed a hideous smile, but he subconsciously avoided Xia Xingchen's question. Although slaughter can bring him abnormal pleasure, it does not mean that he will admit it frankly. War. Who are you, and which side are you on? Have you betrayed humanity and become a running dog of artificial intelligence? Xia Xingchen asked. My name is Oljika, a C-class mecha master of the Mecha Master Association. As a human, I certainly cannot stand on the side of the aliens. I stand on the side of the Northern Empire, because my father is a northerner and I have northern blood in my veins. As for you bastards from the Galactic Empire, I will kill as many as I want. You will be the next one to die. Oljika finally couldn't help but speak out what was in his mind. You too? Xia Xingchen turned to look at the black and white mecha. Of course it's the same for me, Zachly. Zachly laughed. Since it's a war, I will satisfy you too and let you die on the battlefield. Facing the huge caliber mecha laser rifle held by the blue mecha, Xia Xingchen was not afraid at all. He turned his head and said to Kirissa, leave one alive. Kirissa nodded her little head slightly, her expression very serious. Master, I'm afraid I'll be too heavy-handed. Just do your best. Hearing the conversation between Kirissa and Xia Xingchen, Oljika and Zachly, 2 C-class mecha masters, couldn't believe their ears. Especially Oljika. He looked down at Kirissa's small figure from the cockpit of the mecha. Her long silver hair, young body, and the innocence and tenderness on her little face made him excited all over. I like to mess with little girls like you the most. Oljika grinned, with an extremely perverted smile on his face. Zachary, don't kill this little girl. I want to have fun with her. Oljika turned his head and said to his companion. Oljika, you damn pedophile. Well, it seems that our bet is invalid again. Zachary seemed a little unwilling. Oljika's eyes were fixed on Kirissa. When he saw her get off the hovercraft and saw her whole body, it seemed like a flame was burning deep in his throat, making him dry. Kirissa's physical development was far more mature than Oljika expected, especially her slender and long legs, which made Oljika feel crazy. Oljika couldn't help it anymore and wanted to press Kirissa under his body and ravage her. After Kirissa got off the car, she didn't mean to run away, but stood in front of the 2 huge mechas. Oljika stared at Kirissa playfully. He really couldn't figure out how this innocent and naive girl would deal with him. Would she use her soft fists to hit the steel shell of the mecha? Oljika couldn't help laughing when he thought of this. But the next moment, Oljika's smile froze on his face. Behind Kirissa, a huge silver mecha suddenly appeared. That's right, it appeared suddenly, not slowly. In other words, this mecha was definitely not equipped with camouflage equipment such as optical camouflage armor, but really appeared out of thin air. The silver mecha was very big, a head taller than all Jika's mecha, and the shell of the mecha was painted with mysterious lightning-like patterns. At the same time, Kirisa's long silver hair flew upside down, and a layer of light blue light curtain covered her body. She slowly floated up, and rose to a height of 7 meters above the ground. The cockpit hatch opened, and she slowly floated in. Seeing this shocking scene, Jika was stunned. He suddenly felt a strong sense of danger tightly gripping his heart. Don't let her get on the mecha, Jika shouted to remind Zachary. His mecha is good at long-range attacks, but not close-range attacks. At least within the few seconds when his laser sniper rifle was charged, Kirisa had already boarded the mecha. Like Jika, Zachary also had a very dangerous feeling in his heart. The mental power level of a sea-level mecha master is at least level 20. Even if he has not awakened any superpowers, his intuition will be far superior to that of ordinary people, and he will be aware of the crisis before it comes. Ah! Zachary shouted loudly, using this method to dispel the fear in his heart. At the same time, he pulled out 2 laser long swords from his back, the same color as his mecha, one black and one white, and slashed at Kirisa floating in the air. Kirisa had just entered the thunder mech, and the cockpit hatch had not yet been closed. If she was hit by the laser sword, even Kirisa would die on the spot. At this critical moment, the 2 black and white laser swords were blocked by a diamond-shaped transparent light curtain. The light curtain flashed with a white glow, like a transparent glass wall, with countless diamond-shaped ripples radiating from the part where the sword slashed. Ding. The light curtain finally couldn't withstand the huge power of the laser swords and shattered, turning into countless light spots in the air, and dissipating without a trace. A streak of blood flowed from the corner of Xia Xingchen's mouth. He had just used the telekinetic wall to block the fatal blow of the mecha's 2 swords for Kirisa. Chapter 802 Gap. Blocking the full force of a C-class mecha master was Xia Xingchen's limit at this moment. Even so, Xia Xingchen was still shocked by the huge impact of the double swords, and his chest was full of blood and blood was spitting out of his mouth. If the opponent was not a C-class mecha master, or if the mecha was more powerful, I'm afraid he would have been seriously injured at this moment. Humans themselves are not a naturally strong race. At least, the human body alone cannot compete with the power of technology. Telekinesis. Jika and Zachary both widened their eyes at this moment, and their faces were full of astonishment. They simply could not imagine that someone could use telekinesis to block the attack of a mecha. Kill him. At this moment, Jika found that the sniper rifle had been fully charged, and he immediately pulled the trigger in a panic. Swish. A blue light flashed by, and the sniper rifle was broken in 2 from the middle, and a long sword with arcs of electricity emerged from the hands of the thunder mecha. Jika was slightly startled. Knowing that the opponent was a melee mecha, he immediately prepared to retreat. However, it was too late. Several gorgeous knife shadows that could not be captured by the naked eye flashed by. Jika was shocked to find that the limbs of the mecha had been cut off by the blade, and the last knife pierced deeply into the cockpit. Jika's flesh was accurately hit by the thunder blade. Before the blade touched his body, the high voltage arc had already carbonized his flesh, turning it into a charred corpse. Then, a violent explosion occurred in the cockpit. Jika did not even use a single move, and turned into ashes in the explosion. This is the gap between C-class mecha masters and S-class mecha masters. There is a huge gap between the two that cannot be crossed. Not to mention that Kirisa's thunder mecha is the crystallization of the most advanced technology of Lingju Star. Even if the mecha she drives is the same as Jika, or even just an engineering mecha, it can easily defeat Jika who does not know the height of the world. Jika. Seeing his companion die in an instant, Zachary roared. He had no time to think about the gap between him and Kirisa. He rushed up to avenge Jika. The blade flashed. The steel limbs separated from the black and white mecha's body and were chopped into human sticks. The mecha fell heavily to the ground. Kirisa followed Xia Xingchen's instructions and did not deliver a fatal blow, temporarily saving Zakla's life. Xia Xingchen walked up, opened the cockpit of the black and white mecha from the outside, and dragged Zakli out like a dead dog. No, S-Class Mecha Master. You must be an S-Class Mecha Master. Zachary realized the gap between him and Kirissa at this time. His face was unnaturally pale and his lips kept shaking. Tell me about the situation of the Mecha Master Association. Xia Xingchen looked at Zachary and said coldly. If I tell you, will you spare my life? Zachary licked his lips and kept swallowing his saliva. Either tell me or die now. You have no choice. Xia Xingchen's eyes were cold. Okay, I'll tell you. Being stared at by Xia Xingchen, every hair on Zachary's body stood up. He felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious beast. This feeling made him shudder. Zachary immediately told Xia Xingchen the basic situation of the Lubanxing Mecha Master Association and mentioned that the elite of the Mecha Master Association were on their way to carry out a special mission to capture Xia Xingchen's father Xia Yu. Damn it. Hearing that his father was in danger, Xia Xingchen couldn't help but clench his fists. Bang. Without any hesitation, Xia Xingchen pulled out a macro pistol from his waist, shot Zachary in the heart, turned around and got on the hovercraft. Kirissa, let's go. Master, he clearly said everything. Why did you kill him? Kirissa blinked her big eyes, her little face full of confusion. Kirissa, this is war. A cruel war. Xia Xingchen breathed a sigh of relief. He did not explain it in detail to Kirissa, because even if he did, she would not understand it with her little head. There can be no mercy towards the enemy. This is a bloody lesson that Xia Xingchen has learned from his long military career. If Zachary is released, he will definitely inform the Mecha Association. If his father is in danger at that time, Xia Xingchen will regret it. Oh. Kirissa nodded as if she understood, and a glimmer flashed in the depths of her red eyes. At this moment, an elite team consisting of 3 A-level Mecha Masters and 5 B-level Mecha Masters have already driven their mechas to the sky above Xia Yu's residence. The captain of the team is A-level Mecha Master Madden, who has the B-level rated ability Extreme Speed. The mecha is a custom-made cheetah made by the Tang Dynasty group, which is very expensive. The remaining 2 A-class Mecha Masters are Rock Johnson and Robin Hood Joey. They are both excellent players who can compete with S-class Mecha Masters by relying on the powerful performance of their mechas. As for the remaining 5 B-class Mecha Masters, they are all driving customized mechas with different performances. Unlike the standard mechas of the army, the Mecha Masters of the Mecha Master Association will order mechas from the Tang Dynasty group or other military enterprises. The performance of customized mechas is stronger, and because of their different performances, they can make up for each other's disadvantages. This kind of combat team is very strong in small-scale battles, and is quite difficult to deal with. Madden, what is the battle plan? Robin Hood Joey is driving a forest green mecha equipped with optical camouflage, and behind the mecha is an alloy longbow. In this era, where laser weapons are the mainstream, those who use cold weapons are all powerful people, and there are even fewer who use longbows as weapons. Plan? The plan is to find the target, seize the target, and take the target away. Madden spoke very quickly. He was impatient, and was not suitable to be the leader of a team. What about Popovic? Johnson was a big guy with a height of 2.2 meters, and his muscles were as hard as rocks. Although he looked very reckless, he was actually a very careful person. It's just Popovic. He is old, and can't be our opponent at all. Madden was very confident, and took the lead, in driving the mecha down from the air. Xia Yu lived in a quiet lakeside villa. Although this villa looks light and elegant and full of rural flavor, in fact, on the Luban 3 satellite where every inch of land is worth a lot of money, this villa is a sky-high price. Xia Xingchen was away from home all year round, and could not accompany his father. He could only try his best to satisfy the old man in terms of material things, and show his filial piety. Chapter 803, Longbow Shooting the Sun. At this moment, it was noon. However, the orbital speed of satellite number 3 was very fast, and it had already turned to the back of Luban star. The light of the star was blocked, and the entire satellite was plunged into darkness. 2 hours later, satellite number 3 would turn out from the shadow of Luban star again. During this period, the transparent sky above the satellite would emit light to replace the light of the star. The mass of satellite number 3 was very low, and could not provide enough gravity to maintain the atmosphere. It was precisely because of this transparent sky that the constant air density inside the satellite could be guaranteed. The same was true for several other satellites, all of which were covered by a transparent sky, like bubbles in the ocean, and the space tunnels connected these bubbles. Madden and his party landed in front of the lakeside villa in mechas of different styles. They didn't even have the most rudimentary battle plan, which showed how much they despised Popovich. The lakeside villa was quiet, without any sound, and it seemed that no one was inside. Edward, Fermi, Minov, the three of you rush in. Mardeng ordered the 3 B-class mecha divisions. The 3 men immediately jumped off the mecha, wearing combat uniforms, and holding individual laser guns in their hands, preparing to break into the lakeside villa through the main entrance. The mental power of a B-class mecha master has reached level 30. Not only can it control the hormones in the body, but it can also make the body very strong, comparable to athletes who have been trained for many years. Moreover, after the mental power reaches level 30, except for very few people, they will awaken superpowers. These B-class mecha masters are not only very strong in the mecha, but also have the same combat power as specially trained special forces when they get off the mecha. However, after the 3 B-class mecha masters rushed into the room, it was like a stone sinking into the sea, and there was no sound. It was as if this house was a terrible monster that ate the 3 mecha masters alive with skin and bones. Seeing this scene, fine beads of sweat appeared on Madden's forehead. Madden, what should we do now? Joey asked. We can't send anyone in. We will directly use the mecha to flatten this house. Madden was silent for a while. His thoughts turned very quickly, and he immediately made the most reasonable judgment. At this moment, the door of the lakeside villa suddenly opened, and 3 figures flew out like kites with broken strings, falling heavily to the ground with a dull sound. They were the 3 B-class mecha masters who had just rushed in. They lay on the ground, their faces covered with blood, motionless, and obviously unconscious. Ha ha ha. A bunch of rats. Martial arts master Lester walked out of the room with a big laugh, his eyes full of contempt, and stretched out his right hand, hooking his finger at Madden and the others. Come on, be a man, get out of your iron turtle shells. Let's fight. Brother Lester, you'd better be gentle, don't hurt these guys. Xiaoyu appeared behind Lester in an electric wheelchair, and persuaded in a low voice. Xiaoyu's legs are expensive prosthetic limbs, which are no different from his own legs. However, Xiaoyu always felt a little uncomfortable. Therefore, unless he went out, he would wear prosthetic limbs. Usually, he would rather sit in a wheelchair, which feels more comfortable. Brother Xiaoyu, you are really kind. Lester laughed. Since he retired to Lubenstar, he and Popovich have been neighbors with Xiaoyu. Because of Xia Xingchen, Lester also has a good impression of his father and takes good care of him on weekdays. Over time, Lester was deeply impressed by Xiaoyu's integrity. Lester has seen intrigues and schemes all his life, and he has long been tired of it. People as simple and kind as Xiaoyu are rare in today's world. Therefore, Lester and Popovich became good friends with Xiaoyu. In the early days of the Lubanxing robot riot, Popovich actually had the opportunity to escape. However, in order to take care of Xiaoyu, Lester and Popovich stayed. They even lived with Xiaoyu to protect him from the rioting robots. What Lester and the others didn't expect was that it was not robots that came to Xiaoyu, but several mecha masters. Although they didn't know why they came to arrest Xiaoyu, they had bad intentions. In addition, Lester didn't get along with the guys from the Mecha Association, so he took the opportunity to teach them a lesson. Of course, Madden and others couldn't give up the mecha and be stupid enough to fight Lester. Robin Hood Joey took the initiative and took the longbow from the back of the mecha. This longbow is 3 meters long, and the bowstring is a special super alloy with extremely strong elasticity and toughness. On the bow body, there are dense patterns, which are very delicate, and other patterns of vines. When Joey pulled the bow, these vines seemed to come alive, slowly twisting and growing. The most shocking thing is that the Robin Hood mecha only has a long bow in his hand, and no bow and arrow. Exclamation mark. Robin Hood posed a standard bow posture, with nothing in his hand, pulled the bowstring, pulled it to the full moon, and suddenly let go. A wide air blade visible to the naked eye, emitting a shrill scream, flew towards Lester's eyes were straight. He had never seen such a shameless person, driving a mecha to fight against unarmed people, and using air-level weapons right at the beginning. Lester could tell at a glance that the weapon used by this mecha master was a replica of the legendary weapon shooting the sun. The origin of the sun-shooting bow is extraordinary. 300 years ago, when the human interstellar expedition team was exploring the wild starfield, they found an alien ruin that had been abandoned for an unknown period of time on a remote planet. The situation in the alien ruins was very dangerous. The expedition team paid a huge price to bring out a strange longbow covered with patterns from the ruins. With the technology of humans at that time, it was impossible to analyze the properties of the longbow. In order to raise pensions for the dead team members, the expedition team could only sell the longbow at an auction. This longbow was bought at a very low price by a collector who liked to collect alien wonders, and then thrown into the warehouse to be covered with dust. It was not until 100 years ago that the collector's descendants took out the longbow and sold it because the family went bankrupt. At this time, human technology has developed to the point where it can analyze the longbow, and it was discovered that the longbow contains tremendous power. Humans still cannot understand the origin of this power, but just like the jump engine, although they do not understand it, they can imitate it. The Tang Dynasty group bought the longbow at a high price and named it Shooting the Sun. It took 20 years to imitate 2 longbows. With human strength, it is impossible to pull the bowstring, so it can only be equipped on the mecha. One of the imitations of Shooting the Sun fell into Joai's hands. In fact, Joai's Robin Hood mecha was tailor-made for this imitation of Shooting the Sun. Weapons come first, and then mechas. All the performance of the mecha serves the weapons, which can bring the power of the longbow to the extreme. Chapter 804, Fierce Battle. The special feature of the longbow Shooting the Sun is that it can generate air blades through the vibration of the bowstring. This is not Joai's ability, but a special attack generated by the special effects of the air-level weapon Shooting the Sun. In other words, Joai also has other abilities. If the mecha master who fights Joai is deceived by the special effects of the Shooting the Sun imitation and thinks that this is his ability, then he will definitely suffer. Seeing that the air-cutting blade is already in front of him, Lester has no time to think about it. He turned around and pounced on Xiaoyu, throwing him to the ground with his wheelchair. Lester only felt a gust of evil wind flying over a few centimeters above his head, and the shrill whistling sound of the wind made his eardrums hurt. Boom. The huge wind blade flew across and split the wall of the lakeside villa in half from the middle. The entire roof collapsed because it lost its support, making a loud noise. The figures of Xiaoyu and Lester were buried in a pile of rubble. Smoke rose, and the 2 people were unknown, whether they were alive or dead. Joai, you're too harsh. Lester is fine, but what if Xiaoyu dies? The president's order is to bring Xiaoyu back alive. Madden said sternly. Oh, Madden, please believe me. Martial arts master Lester is not someone who will die easily. We dug them out from under the rubble, and Lester must be alive and kicking. Joai laughed out loud. Well, I hope you're right. Madden turned his head and said to Johnson, go clean up the rubble and dig Xiaoyu out of it. Johnson's is an earth-type mutant, and this ability is very powerful. During the battle, he can not only control the soil and rocks, but also change the terrain and create shelters. This ability is very powerful, and can even change the situation in an instant. However, Johnson was reduced to an excavator under Madden's hands. However, Johnson was not good at speaking, and did not say anything. He drove his rock mecha, lifted the roof, and moved a few cement slabs, and saw Lester, who was covered in blood, trying his best to protect Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu's face was covered with dust and his eyes were full of fear, but he was not injured because of Lester's protection. The rock mecha stretched out 2 fingers and wanted to pinch Lester, but at this time, the lake suddenly boiled up, like boiling water. Boom. A huge water column rushed up to the sky, and the water splashed like raindrops. At the top of the water column, there was a mist, and a huge mecha figure slowly emerged from it. A huge body, black paint, and a round double ring in the palm. It was the Magneto mecha of S-level mecha master Popovich. In fact, when Madden and his men attacked, Popovich entered the bottom of the lake through the secret passage under the room. The Magneto mecha was parked in a secret warehouse at the bottom of the lake. The attack of the Mecha Master Association was too sudden, and there was no sign at all. Thanks to Lester's desperate delay, Popovich had time to get on the mecha. In the cockpit of Magneto's mech, Popovich was furious. He glanced at Madden, Johnson, and Joey and shouted, "You despicable rats, I will teach you a lesson today." Before he finished speaking, the alloy ring in Magneto's mech had already been thrown out. The alloy ring was accelerated by electromagnetic force, and its speed was so fast that only a residual image could be seen by the naked eye. The ring cut through the air, making a shrill sound, which made people feel upset. After Xia Xingchen's design and improvement, the performance of Magneto's mech leaped to a higher level, especially the alloy double rings that Popovich had built with a lot of money, which were even more sharp. Recently, Popovich has practiced frequently, and the destructive power and agility of the alloy double rings have risen to a higher level. The alloy double rings whistled in the air, drawing two arcs in the air, attacking Joey's Robin Hood mech from the left and right. The Robin Hood mech was equipped with A-level weapons, and just a casual blow destroyed a house. Popovich knew the power of the Robin Hood mech, and he dared not neglect it. He used a killing move as soon as he attacked, wanting to knock out the opponent's firepower point. Facing the whistling alloy double rings, Joey was also stunned. He felt extremely dangerous in his heart, and cold sweat broke out on his spine. Joey's ability is Super Perception, a C-level ability. Super Perception not only makes Joey's 5 senses more acute than ordinary people, but also gives him a mysterious 6th sense. In the face of danger, Joey is much more alert than ordinary mech masters. However, Joey found that he had no way to escape. The alloy double rings blocked all of Joey's routes, and he was in a dilemma. Magnetic binding. Popovich still felt unsafe. His eyes burst into brilliance. His right hand grabbed down in the air and shouted. In an instant, Popovich's magnetic ability burst out, and a strong magnetic field appeared beside Joey, completely locking the body of the Robin Hood mech. Joey found that all the pointers on the instrument panel were spinning wildly. He stepped hard on the power pedal and turned the power of the thruster to the maximum. However, the Robin Hood mecha was like being held by a huge hand and did not move at all. Joey felt desperate. Only then did he understand how big the gap was between himself, an A-class mecha master, and Popovich, a veteran S-class mecha master. The alloy double rings were already within reach. The Robin Hood mecha took off the long bow from behind and pulled the bowstring to the full moon. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Continuous arrows. In desperation, Joey used his unique skill, 3 stars in a row. 3 air blades gathered together and turned into a huge, visible translucent arrow in mid-air, hitting the alloy ring on the left side of the body. Joey knew very well that with his own strength, it was impossible to shoot down 2 alloy rings at the same time. He could only choose one side. As for the other side, Joey could only choose to resist. Boom. The huge air arrow hit the alloy ring, causing a violent explosion in mid-air. A shock wave spread out with the impact point as the center, producing a white air wave. This air wave carried huge energy and spread in all directions. The glass windows of the nearby houses were covered with spider web-like fine lines in an instant, and then shattered into countless small particles, spraying in all directions. The remaining 2 B-class mecha masters on the mecha also felt a sense of suffocation at the same time, and their faces were unnaturally pale. After all, the Robin Hood mecha had an A-class weapon in its hand. With Joey's desperate efforts, it actually blocked an alloy ring. The ring lost its kinetic energy and fell to the ground. Come back. Popovich waved his hand, and the alloy ring turned and floated again, returning to the hands of Magneto's mecha at a relatively slow speed. Johnson. At this time, Madden also saw that Joey was no match for Popovich at all, and immediately let out a roar. Johnson did not answer, and the khaki rock mecha suddenly sank down and disappeared into the soil. I saw a gully appear on the soil, and the rock mecha was actually sneaking in the soil at an extremely fast speed, and instantly arrived in front of the Robin Hood mecha. Chapter 805. Only speed can break. Boom. Or 3-meter high, half-meter thick earth wall appeared out of thin air, blocking the remaining alloy ring. The alloy ring was accelerated by magnetic force, and its speed was incredibly fast, and it instantly penetrated the earth wall. However, a second identical earth wall had already been erected. The alloy ring instantly penetrated the earth wall again with unstoppable momentum. The third, the fourth, the fifth. The alloy ring penetrated 10 thick earth walls in a row, and finally lost all its kinetic energy, stuck in the middle of the earth wall and unable to move. The huge body of the rock mecha slowly emerged from the ground. In the cockpit, Johnson's face was very ugly, with veins on his forehead. His face was pale, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The earth wall that Johnson erected with his supernatural power was not as fragile as it looked. In fact, the earth wall was very dense, more durable than the bulletproof steel plate of the armored vehicle, and could even withstand the simultaneous bombardment of several laser beams. However, Johnson erected 10 earth walls, which blocked Popovich's attack. Because of the overdrawn mental power, Johnson felt dizzy, but his face was full of ecstasy. Popovich has been famous for too long, and his reputation has spread far and wide. Johnson was able to block Popovich's attack, which was enough for him to brag about for a long time. The rock mech stretched out his hand, trying to take the alloy ring stuck in the earth wall as a trophy. However, as soon as the huge palm of the mech grabbed the ring began to vibrate at an ultra high frequency, and flew back in the direction of the magneto mech. Crack. The alloy ring was very thin, and had sharp edges. Under high speed vibration, it was almost like a high frequency dagger. With a crisp sound, it cut off one of the rock mech's hands. The incision was smooth, and countless neatly arranged thread ends could be seen bursting with dazzling sparks due to damage. Johnson was dumbfounded and stunned for a long time. Then he controlled the rock mech to squat down, and picked up the broken palm. Good opportunity. Madden had not made a move at the side, but was observing, waiting for the best time to make a move. The 2 alloy rings of Magneto's mecha did not return to his hands. Moreover, Popovich had just used magnetic binding, so his mental strength must be in a weak state. Now, a white light suddenly flashed across Madden's eyes, and he had activated his superpower speed. Madden's mecha was called Speed. As the name suggests, this mecha sacrificed all sacrificial attributes for speed, and increased its speed to a terrifying level. On the surface of the speed mecha, there was a constant stream of light, and the body was slightly bent, a bit like the posture of an athlete starting. Behind the speed mecha, there were as many as 8 red light thrusters installed, all turned on, and the hot red light turned into 2 red glowing light wings. Whoosh! The light wings flashed, and Madden's mental strength had reached its peak, and the mecha shot out like a sharp arrow. Madden was 300 meters away from Popovich. However, in front of the speed mecha, an inverted white arc appeared, which was an air wall. The speed mech instantly broke through the air wall, making a loud thunderous sound, and turned into a beam of light rushing towards Magneto's mech, breaking the sound barrier. Supersonic flight is not a rare thing for mechas. However, it is very rare to break the speed of sound in just 1 second without even accelerating. Facing Madden's sudden attack, Popovich and Magneto's mech was also shocked. He had noticed that Madden had not made a move, so he was always on guard against him. However, what Popovich did not expect was that Madden's attack was so fierce. The martial arts in the world are indestructible. Only speed cannot be broken. In the ruins of the villa, Lester saw this scene and was surprised, shouting out a proverb in martial arts. At the moment of life and death, Popovich did not dare to be arrogant, and immediately put his hands together, and placed a powerful magnetic field in front of him to stop Madden's attack. However, the speed of the speed mech was too fast. In 1 second, the mecha rushed out of the magnetic field and hit the Magneto mecha fiercely. Boom. Because of the high speed, the metal surface of the speed mecha was hot, and glowed dark red. A dark red stream of light passed by the side of the Magneto mecha. The magnetic field still played a role, causing the direction of the speed mecha to deviate slightly. Otherwise, the Magneto mecha would be hit directly. Even so, half of the body of the Magneto mecha had disappeared, leaving only an arm and a leg, barely standing. The steel in the defective part of the Magneto mecha had melted, and even formed small crystals. It can be seen how terrifying the attack power of the speed mecha was just now. In the cockpit, Popovich's face was pale, and a streak of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Although he was not directly hit, he was seriously injured in the previous confrontation. The speed mecha rushed forward another 200 meters, and rushed into the lake before stopping. The lake water cooled the high temperature mecha shell quickly, and white mist was coming out of the whole body. Because the high temperature suddenly met the cold, the shell of the speed mecha was cracked and covered with fine cracks. The attack of the speed mecha is called super speed, which is a trick that hurts the enemy by 1000 and hurts itself by 800. Wow. Madden opened his mouth and spit out a mouthful of blood, staining his clothes red, but his face was full of crazy joy. Win. I win. I defeated Popovich and defeated the S-class Mecha Master. Madden roared loudly, and his crazy voice was filled in the public channel. In Madden's view, Popovich had lost his ability to fight, and he would definitely win. However, at this moment, a sharp and unique whistling sound suddenly rang out, and in Madden's unbelievable eyes, an alloy ring flew towards him again. Madden screamed, and the speed mecha immediately jumped out of the lake, broke the sound barrier again in the air, and fled quickly. The alloy ring passed through the back of the speed mech, leaving a deep scar on the back armor. If Madden was a little slower, the speed mech would have been cut in two. Old man. You only have half your life left, and you dare to attack me. Madden flew the mech in the air for a circle, and when he saw that the alloy ring was no longer chasing him, he flew back, his face as gloomy, as if water was about to drip out. Only half of the body of the Magneto mech was left, standing on one leg, but Popovich's face was full of arrogance, and he snorted coldly, "Little guys, even if I only have half my life left, don't even think about touching my friend." Chapter 806 A critical moment. Popovich's hair and beard were all white, and his eyes were bright, like a Twilight Lion King. Although the Lion King is old, he is still majestic. Facing the Magneto mech standing on one leg, for a moment, none of the 5 mech masters dared to step forward, and their faces were all filled with fear. Coward. Coward. Popovich cursed through the public channel, wanting to provoke the enemy mech masters to come forward. Only half of the Magneto mech was left, and there was only an alloy ring in his hand. The hit rate and range were greatly reduced. If the distance was too far, Popovich would not be sure of hitting. Humph. Provocation? It's useless. Madden's extreme speed ability can not only increase the speed of the mech, moreover, it makes him think faster. He saw through Popovich's plan in an instant, sneered, and was not fooled at all. Joey, pay attention to the ring in the old man's hand. If he throws it out, shoot it down. Johnson, pay attention to defense, and don't get within 100 meters of Popovich. Madden turned to the remaining 2 B-class mecha masters and said, "You two, shoot Popovich with laser rifles. I want him to die humiliatingly in the hands of a B-class mecha master." "Okay, Captain." Being able to kill Popovich, a famous S-class mecha master, is not only a great achievement, but also an opportunity to make a name for himself. Of course, the 2 B-class mecha masters could not refuse and immediately agreed. The 2 B-class mecha masters immediately took off the laser rifles on the back of the mecha and began to shoot at the Magneto mecha. The Magneto mecha was originally very fast. With Popovich's reaction speed and rich combat experience, he could easily dodge these lasers. However, at this moment, the Magneto mecha had a broken leg and its mobility was only 20% of the original. It was a miracle that it could stand still. Popovich could only throw out the alloy rings in vain, colliding with the laser beams, to ensure his own safety. Seeing that Popovich could only defend, and had no chance to fight back, Joey laughed and pulled the longbow in his hand to the full moon state. This time, Joey did not let go of the bowstring immediately, but kept accumulating power. The hand of the mecha holding the bowstring had a white light condensing. A huge arrow phantom floated above the head of the Robin Hood mecha, and as time passed, it continued to grow larger. Popovich's head, I accept it. The arrow phantom became 20 meters long, like a spear, suspended above the head of the Robin Hood mecha. God's arrow shoots the sun. Joey shouted and suddenly released the bowstring. The huge arrow, like the length of a missile, flew towards the Magneto mecha with irresistible terrifying energy. Madden, Joey, Johnson, the 3 A-level mecha masters all had victorious smiles on their faces. Although it was 1 against 3, it was a great achievement that the 3 of them could kill Popovich together. In the Magneto mech, Popovich was already sweating profusely, and his mech combat suit was soaked with sweat. At this moment, Popovich had used up all his strength, and his body seemed to be drained. Of course, even if Popovich was in his prime, the Magneto Mech might not be able to withstand Joey's god arrow shooting the sun. Goodbye, brilliant sea of stars. Popovich closed his eyes and took his hands off the Mech control console. He was so desperate that he gave up resistance. At this moment, a huge Mech figure fell from the sky and collided with the arrow shadow with a boom. The arrow shadow suddenly turned into a red fire cloud, covering the Magneto Mech and a nameless Mech that suddenly appeared. Stupid. I don't know who you are, but you dare to compete with my magic arrow shooting son. You will definitely end up with the machine destroyed and the people dead. Joey's mouth twitched twice and a mocking smile emerged. The fire cloud soon dissipated and a tall mecha with a yellow light on its body surface was half crouching in front of Magneto's mecha. The mecha held a tattered rectangular shield in its hand, and the outer shell of the mecha had a layer of translucent film, which was a layer of telekinesis wall. Crack. The telekinesis wall cracked, making a slight sound, and broke into pieces, turning into light and dissipating. In the Xia Xingchen mecha, Xia Xingchen breathed a sigh of relief, and a bright smile bloomed on his face. Fortunately, I caught up. Xia Xingchen learned from Zackley that the Mecha Association was going to attack his father, so he immediately abandoned the hovercraft, took the Xia Xingchen mecha out of the mental space, and rushed towards the lakeside villa. Xia Xingchen activated overclocking and strengthening skills continuously, and his speed was even faster than Kirisa's thunder. Fortunately, Xia Xingchen arrived not too late. If he had been even a second later, Popovich would have been buried here. A few seconds later, the silver-white thunder mech fell to the ground like a cannonball. In the smoke, one could vaguely see the surface of the mech flashing with mysterious lightning-like patterns. Master, you run too fast. I can't catch up with you even without thunder. Kirisa's clear and beautiful voice rang out in the public channel. Girl's voice. Who is it? All the mech masters present were stunned, including Popovich. He looked at the two mechas in front of him, one black and one silver. The models of these two mechas were both ones he had never seen before. However, Popovich could feel the taste of technology from their appearance. Old man, it's me, Xia Xingchen. Xia Xingchen's face emerged from the screen with a smile on his face. In the past, Xia Xingchen called Popovich old gentleman. Later, Popovich went to Lubenstar, lived next door to Xiaoyu, and called Xiaoyu brother. Xia Xingchen also changed his name and called Popovich old man. Xia Xingchen. Popovich couldn't believe his eyes, but the person on the screen was obviously Xia Xingchen. Why are you here? Popovich was full of doubts. Old man, it's hard to explain. I'll tell you slowly when I have time. Xia Xingchen turned his head to look at the 5 mechas of Madden and others. Murderous intent emerged in his eyes. Now, I'll get rid of these people first. Absolutely not. Popovich said hurriedly. The 3 of them are very strong. Even I'm not their opponent. You can't be their opponent at all. Hurry up and take Lester and your father away. I will find a way to stop them. Popovich had fought with Xia Xingchen before and knew his strength inside out. Although Xia Xingchen's strength was undoubtedly the best among the younger generation. However, Xia Xingchen was only a C-class mecha master after all. Even after being tempered in the north, his mental power level was improved, and he had the strength of a B-class mecha master. He could not be a match for the 3 A-class mecha masters. As for the girl on the silver mecha, she just called Xia Xingchen master, so her strength was probably lower than Xia Xingchen's. In addition, her voice was very childish, so she should be thankful that she was a D-class mecha master. In short, even if that girl was a B-class mecha master like Xia Xingchen, the 2 of them together were no match for any of the other A-class mecha masters. Chapter 807. Escape is not my style. Xia Xingchen? It's really you. Inside the cockpit of the cheetah mecha, the expression on Madden's face was very interesting. On the one hand, Madden was very shocked. Although Madden had received intelligence from Victor and knew that Xia Xingchen might have infiltrated Lubenstar. However, Madden did not expect that Xia Xingchen was really fearless and infiltrated Lubenstar, which was already controlled by artificial intelligence. This behavior, in Madden's view, was tantamount to seeking death. On the other hand, Madden was very excited because he knew very well what catching Xia Xingchen meant to the Northern Empire. Madden and other Mecha Masters followed Victor, the vice president of the Mecha Masters Association, to betray the Galactic Empire and join the Northern Empire. Although there were verbal guarantees from the Duke of St. Peter and Princess Athena, who promised to give these traitors a lot of rewards and status. However, Madden was uneasy in his heart. However, if Madden could capture or kill Xia Xingchen, he could give a letter of surrender to Emperor Nicholas the Great. When he thought of this, Madden was immediately ecstatic. He knew that Xia Xingchen was just a Class B Mecha Master, and could not be his opponent at all. Kill Xia Xingchen. Our prosperity and wealth depend on this. Madden shouted. Under his command, 5 Mecha Masters rushed towards Xia Xingchen like sharks smelling blood. The first to bear the brunt were the 2 B-class Mecha Masters. They were already in shooting mode, and immediately turned their guns. The muzzles of the laser rifles emitted dazzling laser beams, and flew towards the Xia Mecha. The Xia Mecha did not intend to dodge, but just raised the simple golden shield in its hand. Boom. The laser hit the shield accurately. No shield could withstand being hit by the laser beam at such a close distance, let alone a simple and shabby shield like a piece of iron. A B-class Mecha Master had a contemptuous smile on his lips. He was about to turn on the laser rifle at full power to hit the Xia Mecha, so that it could not raise its head, and suddenly felt a piercing cold chill coming from the depths of his spine. The extreme fear instantly deprived him of his hearing, and he felt that the whole world was silent. Then, he saw from the screen of his comrade's combat channel that Madden was stunned, his mouth opened wide, as if he was shouting something. However, this B-class Mecha Master could not hear a word. However, he suddenly looked up and saw a thick laser beam reflected from the direction of the Xia Mecha, and it was in front of him in a blink of an eye. He didn't even have time to think, and his whole body was shrouded in the gorgeous laser beam. The laser beam carried huge energy and instantly penetrated the cockpit, burning his entire body to ashes. Boom. There was another loud noise, and the engine of the Mecha exploded, and a mushroom cloud rose up. The broken Mecha parts flew everywhere with the airwave. The remaining 4 Mecha Masters instinctively lay down and looked for cover to hide. These Mecha Masters were all stunned. To be honest, none of them saw clearly what Xia Xingchen did just now. It was obviously the Xia Mecha that was hit by the laser beam, but all the lasers were reflected back. Stop using laser weapons. The shield in his hand can reflect lasers. Madden reacted quickly and shouted immediately. While they were in a daze, Xia Xingchen had already opened the cockpit ladder and let Popovich, Lester and Xia Yu enter his cockpit. Xingchen. Xia Yu was so excited to see his son that his eyes were filled with tears. Dad. Xia Xingchen stood up and hugged Xia Yu tightly, his eyes moist. Xingchen, now is not the time to reminisce. The speed of your mecha seems to be good. Let's find a way to break through immediately. Popovich still felt that Xia Xingchen could not be a match for the other 4 mecha divisions. He judged the situation and thought that breaking through was the best choice. That's right. Let's break through. Lester nodded, agreeing with Popovich's opinion. He was hit on the head by the rubble that fell from the roof, but it was all external injuries. After spraying the blood coagulation spray, the bleeding stopped immediately. It was not serious. On the other side, Madden said through the team channel, Joey, you pay attention to blocking Xia Xingchen's retreat. He will definitely escape. Johnson, when Xia Xingchen escapes, you and I will chase him. Joey and Johnson both nodded, understood. However, Xia Xingchen had no intention of escaping, and smiled coldly. Escape is not my style. You are so stupid not to escape. Joey smiled coldly, and released the bowstring. An air blade flew towards the Xia Mecha. Swish, swish. The air blade passed through the trees on both sides of the road, and suddenly more than a dozen trees broke into 2, and fell to the ground. However, the power of the air blade did not decrease, and it still carried incomparable power, and flew towards the Xia Mecha. Telekinesis wall. Strengthen. Xia Xingchen shouted twice in succession. A telekinetic wall appeared in front of the Xia Mecha. However, this telekinetic wall could not withstand the attack of the airblade at all, and only reduced its speed a little. At the same time, both palms of the Xia Mecha flashed with yellow light, and suddenly slapped in the middle, making a loud sound like thunder. The airblade disappeared. Surprisingly, it was slapped away by the palm of the Xia Mecha. Krissa, that fast guy is left to you. Xia Xingchen shouted, and the speed of the Xia mecha suddenly increased, with purple light gushing from behind, rushing towards Joai who was driving the Robin Hood mecha. Okay. Krissa showed an innocent smile on her face, and looked at Madden. I heard that you are very fast. Let's compare and see who is faster. Stupid. As if he heard the childish tone in Klissa's voice, Madden shook his head, and was very disapproving. Since Madden's mecha was called Cheetah, he was very confident in his speed. There was actually a little girl who didn't know her place, and wanted to challenge his strengths. Of course, he thought that the other party was making a fool of herself. Speed. Madden ignored Klissa's intention. His eyes suddenly became blank. He used the speed skill, and rushed towards Joai. He wanted to intercept Xia Xingchen from the middle. After all, the Robin Hood mecha was a long-range model. Its power would be greatly reduced after being approached by others. Thunder. Klissa did not give Madden the chance to escape. She shouted in a deep voice and activated the painting skill Thunder. The speed of the Thunder mecha immediately soared to the extreme, turning into a silver streak, chasing after the Cheetah mecha. So fast. Madden was extremely shocked. Being entangled by Krissa, he could only change direction and escape towards the lake. The Thunder mech chased after him, biting the Cheetah mech tightly, and the distance between the two was constantly shortening. Chapter 808, taking the upper hand. On the lake, the Thunder mech and the Cheetah mech turned into two rays of light, one yellow and one silver, chasing each other at a super speed that could not be observed by the naked eye. The speed of the two mechas had long exceeded the speed of sound. Sonic booms sounded on the lake, and the mechas appeared and disappeared like floating lights. At the same time, Xia Xingchen drove the Xia mech towards Joai. The speed of the Xia mech was very fast, but it was still far behind the two monsters, the Thunder mech and the Cheetah mech. In the cockpit, Joai felt a strong sense of oppression, but he could still capture the movements of the Xia mech through his naked eyes and radar. Joai sneered a few times, and pulled the longbow again. 3 consecutive arrows. Without any hesitation, Joai used the trick of the consecutive arrows again, and 3 air blades shot towards Xia Xingchen. The flight trajectory of the air blade was not a straight line, but with a slight arc, as if it had eyes, staring closely at the Xia mech, changing direction with the movement of the mech, and it could not be shaken off at all. At this moment, Xia Xingchen showed a nearly perfect operation skill. The Xia mecha kept changing directions, and its speed was sometimes fast and sometimes slow. Suddenly, it accelerated and actually shook off the air blade that was following it. This is impossible. Joai was shocked and stared at the dashboard. The data on it showed that Xia Xingchen's mecha had exceeded the speed of sound in just a moment. It was even faster than Madden's Cheetah mecha. In the blink of an eye, the Xia mecha had already rushed in front of Joai. Joai was terrified. Although he didn't know why Xia Xingchen, a B-level mecha master, was so powerful, he felt that he seemed to be no match for Xia Xingchen. Johnson. Joai shouted and asked his companions to help him. Johnson roared, and the khaki rock mecha suddenly punched the ground with both fists. With a loud bang, a bottomless pit appeared under the feet of the Xia mecha. At the same time, the figure of the rock mecha suddenly disappeared and appeared at the bottom of the huge pit, stretching out its hands to grab the feet of the Xia mecha. The Xia mecha was caught and immediately pulled into the bottom of the pit. No. Johnson's heart suddenly felt cold. The Xia mecha was not pulled in by himself, but jumped in on its own initiative. Johnson's reaction was not slow. He made a judgment in an instant and stepped on the power pedal to the bottom. The rock mecha rushed towards the Xia mecha like a running rhino. Johnson had already deeply felt the crisis, so he had to strike first and kill Xia Xingchen. The rock mecha has a very strong defense ability. The surface of the shell not only has thick armor, but also a layer of rock barrier. This is the special protection brought by Johnson's supernatural power. If it were any other B-level mecha master, Johnson believed that no one would be able to break through the defense of the rock mecha. However, nothing is absolute. Xia Xingchen had no idea of giving in. Like Johnson, he also stepped on the power pedal to death. Boom. The two mechas collided instantly. The rock mecha stretched out its right arm, and with a fierce sound of breaking through the air, it smashed down towards the head of the Xia mecha with terrifying force. Relying on the enhanced skills and the super high defense of the Xia Xingchen mecha, Xia Xingchen was confident that he could take the blow from the rock mecha. However, fighting with brute force is the way street drunks fight, and as a warrior, Xia Xingchen certainly would not take this punch. Through the thick bulletproof glass of the cockpit, Xia Xingchen felt the fierce wind cutting his face. In the critical moment, he showed the comprehensive capabilities of the Xia Xingchen mecha and the superb fighting skills of the warrior. In the narrow space of the pit, the Xia Xingchen mecha did not have room to dodge and move, but just lowered his body slightly to avoid the heavy punch of the rock mecha. At the same time, the legs of the Xia Xingchen mecha slightly arched, and the body suddenly bounced diagonally upward, and a punch hit the head of the rock mecha. Bang! With a muffled sound, cracks appeared on the face of the rock mech, and then a layer of rock barrier fell off. Inside the rock mech, Johnson felt a violent shock, almost throwing him out of the driver's seat. What a terrible force. Johnson shook his dizzy head and sighed in his heart. However, at this moment, Johnson suddenly felt a gust of wind blowing into the cockpit. The wind was not strong, but it carried a strong smell of blood, causing Johnson's facial muscles to twitch violently. Johnson looked up and saw only a huge fist in his field of vision, smashing towards him like a mountain. What a fast punch. Only this thought flashed through Johnson's mind. He could no longer dodge and could only block. However, the intuition of the A-level mech master told him that the result of blocking this punch would probably be fatal. However, Johnson had no choice at all. He could only rely on this instinct to raise the arm of the mech and erect a rock barrier in front of the cockpit to meet the punch of the Xia Xingchen mech. The next moment, Johnson felt like he was hit by a meteorite. The rock barrier simply couldn't withstand this kind of force. Johnson watched helplessly as a huge dent appeared in the middle of the thick rock barrier, and then a clear fist shape appeared. The heavy pressure drained Johnson's mental power in an instant. He could only watch in vain as the barrier was pierced by a fist and hit the cockpit of the rock mecha hard. Bang! The thick bulletproof glass of the cockpit trembled, cracked, and shattered under the terrible force of the fist. Boom! The cockpit of the rock mecha was pierced. With just 2 punches, the A-level mecha master Rock Johnson died on the spot and turned into a pool of meat. Xia Xingchen's face was indifferent. The Xia Xingchen mecha retracted the fist with blood and machine debris standing on it, as if nothing had happened. It suddenly jumped up from the bottom of the pit and returned to the ground. At this time, Joey drove the Robin Hood mecha and just arrived at the edge of the pit. The battle between Xia Xingchen and Johnson was too fast, and it only took 10 seconds. During these 10 seconds, Joey was delayed for 2 seconds because of hesitation, and he just arrived now. Joey originally wanted to take advantage of Johnson's entanglement with Xia Xingchen, and he would attack Xia Xingchen from a high position with a bow and arrow. Joey's wishful thinking was good, but it backfired. Seeing the cockpit of the rock mecha being blown up, Joey's eyes kept twitching, and his face was full of horror. Xia Xingchen did not give Joey more time, and dodged and rushed up, punching the abdomen of the Robin Hood mecha, punching a huge hole in it. Joey's Robin Hood mecha is a long-range model mecha, which has a very strong attack power at a distance. But the mecha does not carry too much armor. What's more, even if the rock mecha is covered with heavy armor and protected by a rock barrier, it can't stop the iron fist of the Xia Xingchen mecha, let alone the Robin Hood mecha. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 809, Leading an Era. Joey made a mistake in judgment and rushed up with the Robin Hood mech. The moment he wanted to beat the fallen dog, he was already dead. In the Robin Hood mech, Joey was hit hard, and a large amount of blood foam flowed from the corners of his mouth. His face was full of disbelief, and he shouted with his last strength, "Why? Why is this? You are obviously just a B-class mech master. Why are you so strong?" Xia Xingchen looked at the dying man with indifference, and answered his question, "That's right, I'm just a B-class mech master. But the mech I drive is ahead of you by a whole era. It's like a noble with a musket facing a barbarian warrior with a spear. You absolutely have no chance of winning. This is the power of technology. Technology. Xia Xingchen's words echoed in Zhou mind, but at this moment his pupils had begun to dissipate, and his eyes could only look at the Xianheng mech absent-mindedly, full of confusion and unwillingness. The driver died, and the Robin Hood mech fell to the ground like a pile of scrap metal. The Xianheng mech reached out and grabbed the longbow on it. What Xia Xingchen valued was not only that the longbow shooting sun was an A-level weapon. Moreover, the longbow was engraved with delicate vine patterns. For some reason, Xia Xingchen felt that the vine patterns on the bow were somewhat similar to the patterns on the mecha paint. At the same time, the Thunder Mecha and the Cheetah Mecha had already collided with each other. While maintaining their high speed, they were still engaged in close combat. The remaining B-level Mecha Master who was still alive had a look of astonishment on his face. He looked at Xia Xingchen who had already won, and then looked at Carissa and Madden who had turned into two streams of light. He could only lower the muzzle of his gun and point it at the ground. This level of battle was not something that a B-level Mecha Master like him could intervene in. It must be said that Madden was a strong opponent. Even Xia Xingchen might not be able to get much benefit from Madden's extreme speed skill. The most important thing was that, even if Xia Xingchen could beat Madden, he could not leave him behind. However, Madden was doomed to lose when he met Carissa. In terms of rank, Carissa is an S-class Mecha Master, much stronger than Madden. In terms of mecha performance, the Thunder Mecha is the crystallization of the science and technology of the Lingju Star, and is equipped with a 3-piece spiritual power coating. Like the Xianheng Mecha, the technology level of the Thunder Mecha is a whole era ahead of Madden's Cheetah Mecha. Madden has been able to hold on until now, on the one hand, because he is strong enough. On the other hand, it is because Carissa is playful and did not use a killer move, but deliberately played with Madden like a cat playing with a mouse. Madden certainly knew this fact, but he had no other choice. He could only overdraw his spiritual power again and again, regardless of the fact that the Cheetah Mecha's engine was already in an overloaded state, and increase the speed again. Increase again. However, what Madden did was completely in vain. The whole body of the Cheetah Mecha began to turn red, and black smoke came out, but it still couldn't get rid of the Thunder Mecha. Xingchen, who is this little girl who calls you master? I can feel her mental power, which is boundless and full of surging power. She is clearly an S-class Mecha Master. And the performance parameters of the Mechas you two are driving, why are they so abnormal? Popovich stared at the Thunder Mecha. With his mental power of up to level 50, he could barely see a series of after images passing through the air. Popovich's heart was filled with waves of shock. Old man, her name is Carissa, and she is indeed an S-class Mecha Master. Our two Mechas are new era painted Mechas, and they can no longer be simply measured by performance and parameters. After all, fighting is not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. Xia Xingchen explained with a smile. Painted Mechas. I'm really old and can't keep up with the times. Popovich sighed. He originally thought that his Magneto Mecha was enough to stand at the top of the empire. However, he did not expect that he would be defeated by 3 A-class Mecha Masters. What Popovich couldn't accept the most was that Xia Xingchen killed 2 of the 3 A-class Mecha Masters in just a moment. Does this mean that Xia Xingchen, a B-class Mecha Master, is stronger than me, an S-class Mecha Master? Popovich has always been arrogant, but at this moment he couldn't help but begin to doubt his own strength. Old man, this world is really changing too fast. If you don't pay attention, you will be surpassed by technology and left far behind. Xia Xingchen smiled and said, but as long as you are willing to catch up, it's not too late now. If your Magneto Mecha is equipped with a mental power paint, I'm not bragging, you can gallop across the entire galaxy. Really? Can an old man like me catch up? Popovich's eyes sparkled. He has always been a stubborn old man who never admits defeat and refuses to admit old age. Really? Xia Xingchen nodded and promised. Old man, as long as you believe in me, I will personally paint it for you. Great. Thank you, Xingchen. I'm satisfied with your kindness. Popovich clenched his hands tightly. A long-lost passion and impulse emerged in his heart, which seemed to make him 70 years younger, and as if he had returned to his youth. At this moment, Madden suddenly screamed. Because the engine of the Cheetah Mech had been overloaded for a long time, the nuclear reactor finally couldn't support it and exploded. The nuclear fusion reactor of the Cheetah Mech is a product of the Tang Dynasty group. It has stable performance, safety, and reliability. Except for the high cost, there are almost no disadvantages. However, under the overload operation, the engine still couldn't bear it, and a nuclear explosion occurred. Get out of here quickly. Seeing the shell of the cheetah mech cracked, and countless red lights sprayed out from it, in an instant, the entire mech turned into a ball of fire that could not be looked at, and Xia Xingchen let out a loud roar. Carissa reacted quickly. Seeing that something was wrong, the thunder mech moved, and was already 1,000 meters away. Needless to say, Xia Xingchen immediately activated the Xia mech, and prepared to fly away from the explosion range. At this time, Xia Xingchen found that the B-class mech master who surrendered was motionless at this moment, as if he was shocked. Damn it. Xia Xingchen didn't think much about it. He cursed angrily, turned back resolutely, flew back to the B-class mech master, grabbed the arm of the mech, and flew out with all his strength. Boom. A mushroom cloud rose up, with the cheetah mech as the center, and everything within a radius of 10 kilometers was razed to the ground. Chapter 810, Battle Power Disparity. Xia Xingchen let out a long sigh, stopped the Xia mech, turned around and looked at the desolate land, still with lingering fear. It was a close call. Besides Xia Xingchen, Popovich was also pale. If we were a little late just now, I'm afraid we would have been buried in the nuclear explosion. Yeah. Lester nodded and looked at Xia Xingchen with some complaints. Xingchen, just now at a critical moment, you actually had the mood to save the enemy. I really don't know what you are thinking. In the hand of the Xia mech, there was a black object, which was the cockpit of the B-class mech master. Originally, the Xia mech grabbed the mech of the B-class mech master, but the weight of the mech was too heavy, which really affected the speed of the Xia mech, so Xia Xingchen simply grabbed the cockpit. The cockpit was gently placed on the ground, and after a long time, a mech master crawled out of it. His forehead was covered with cold sweat, his eyes were full of panic, and he waved at Xia Xingchen, shouting words of thanks. I have something to ask him. Xia Xingchen walked out of the cockpit, and walked in front of the B-class mecha master. He was a man in his 30s, with short grey hair and a thin figure. Seeing Xia Xingchen walk out of the mecha, he hesitated for a while, walked up to Xia Xingchen and bowed. Xia Xingchen, although you killed my companion, I still want to thank you for saving me. My name is William, the heir of the William family of Terrastar. Xia Xingchen waved his hand and said bluntly, I'm not interested in your identity at all. William's expression was a little embarrassed, and he was silent for a while. Since you saved me, please send me to a safe place. I don't want to be torn to pieces by those mechanical bastards. Xia Xingchen smiled. Didn't you surrender to the north? Will those war weapons still cause trouble to you? William shrugged his shoulders. I don't drive a mecha. Who knows what I look like in the eyes of those mechanical bastards? As the saying goes, those who are not of my race must have different hearts. I don't trust those robots. William's thoughts represent the attitude of most people towards robots and artificial intelligence. Tell me the information of the Mecha Association, and I will consider taking you to a safe place. Xia Xingchen said in a deep voice. This? William's face showed hesitation. He had already betrayed the Galactic Empire. If he sold the information of the Mecha Association to Xia Xingchen, he would become a double traitor. At that time, he could only hide in a remote planet to avoid these two huge forces. However, if William didn't tell him, he would die now. Like other Mecha Masters, William did not have much loyalty to the Northern Empire. He was just weighing his own gains and losses. After repeated consideration, William finally decided to tell Xia Xingchen everything that happened in the Mecha Association. You mean, St. Peter is in the Mecha Association? The original president was also killed by Vice President Victor, and as many as 60 Mecha Masters were imprisoned in the basement because they did not obey Victor's orders? Xia Xingchen frowned tightly. It's absolutely true. William cursed and swore. Galaxy, every word William, say is true. It is indeed true. Xia Xingchen suddenly looked up at the sky and saw more than a dozen mechas flying towards this side under the transparent sky. The silver-white mecha in the lead was clearly the Kanglang mecha of St. Peter, an S-class mecha master. The Luban 3 satellite was not large, and the nuclear explosion of the cheetah mecha alarmed St. Peter. He reacted quickly and immediately brought all his men to rush in this direction. just in time to intercept Xia Xingchen. Whoosh! Behind the Kanglang mecha, a long-range mecha holding a sniper laser gun pulled the trigger, and a laser beam cut through the sky, targeting Xia Xingchen and William. With the human body, it is impossible to avoid the laser beam. Fortunately, Kirissa has been on guard nearby. The thunder mecha flashed and blocked the trajectory of the laser beam, raising the god's golden shield in his hand to block the deadly beam. Disperse! Saint Peter shouted in time, and the mechas behind him quickly dispersed, and the reflected laser beams passed through the group of mechas. Taking advantage of this gap, Xia Xingchen had already brought William back to the Xianheng mecha. Idiot. Didn't I tell you that Xia Xingchen's mecha is equipped with a shield that can reflect laser beams? No one is allowed to fire. Saint Peter cursed. He had already received intelligence from Athena and knew Xia Xingchen's background very well. Saint Peter turned his head and looked at Xia Xingchen with a sneer on his face. Xia Xingchen, I didn't expect that we would meet so soon. Saint Peter, you are a dignified S-class mecha master, but you are willing to be Athena's running dog. You are a traitor to mankind. Xia Xingchen scolded. Athena is the princess, and as a minister, I must obey the princess's orders. Saint Peter said shamelessly without blushing. Princess. Xia Xingchen was also stunned. He didn't expect that Nicholas the Great was so stupid that he actually took an artificial intelligence as his concubine. What kind of magic does Athena have? Why did she bewitch the monarchs and ministers of the Northern Empire? No point in talking. Catch Xia Xingchen. Saint Peter didn't want to talk nonsense with Xia Xingchen at all. He waved his hand and ordered loudly. Suddenly, the 12 mechas behind Saint Peter were eager to try and swooped in the direction of Xia Xingchen. 6 B-class mecha masters, 6 A-class mecha masters. Xia Xingchen's mind expanded and immediately felt that the enemy's mental power fluctuations were very strong, and his face was also surprised. The Lubangsing Mecha Master Association has a deep foundation, and it is the period of Mecha Master assessment, so almost all the strong men in the association have come. With so many A-class mechas, the combat power is even comparable to that of a well-organized space fleet. Xia Xingchen is a B-class mecha master, relying on the performance advantages of Xianheng mechas. Facing 2 A-class mecha masters at the same time is already the limit. Not to mention the 6 A-class mecha masters. Xia Xingchen knew very well that no matter how strong the Xianheng mecha was, it was not invincible. It was no match for the mecha masters in front of him. Moreover, the opponent also had Saint Peter to support him, staring at the thunder mecha with a covetous eye, watching Kirissa closely. Once Kirissa made any move, Saint Peter would immediately take action. Saint Peter's Kanglang mecha was also a new type of painted mecha equipped with spiritual power paint. Kirissa had fallen at the hands of Saint Peter before on Mandastar. To be honest, Xia Xingchen and Kirissa might not be able to beat Saint Peter together. Even if they could win, it would be a miserable victory. Not to mention that Saint Peter had so many strong men behind him. The difference in combat power between the two sides was too great. At this time, Xia Xingchen suddenly felt the earth shaking. He cast his eyes towards the horizon and saw countless mechanical beasts surrounding him like a tsunami. Athena also took action. She has made up her mind that no matter how painful the price, she must kill Xia Xingchen. Chapter 811, Encircled. Master, what should we do now? Should we fight? Kirissa looked up at the Kanglang mecha in the air, her eyes burning with a strong desire to fight. Before, Kirissa was defeated by Saint Peter. This girl with a strong desire to win has always been brooding over it. Kirissa is eager to get back at the game. She only has Saint Peter in her eyes, and she doesn't care about the other 12 mecha masters at all. No, we can't fight. We run away immediately. As soon as Xia Xingchen finished speaking, he turned on the purple light thruster at full power. Purple light wings appeared on the back of the Xianheng mecha, and in a blink of an eye, it was 1,000 meters away. Okay. Although Kirissa was very reluctant, she also knew that the gap in combat power between the enemy and me was too big. Kirissa's eyes were blank for a while, and she turned on the thunder skill. The thunder mecha turned into a stream of light and followed closely behind the Xianheng mecha. The thunder mecha is known for its speed, even faster than the extremely fast Madden, who is known as the fastest man in the galaxy. As for the Xia Xingchen mecha, because it is equipped with the most advanced purple light thruster, its instantaneous burst speed may not be as good as that of the thunder mecha, but its endurance is stronger. In the blink of an eye, the figures of the Xia Xingchen mecha and the thunder mecha have disappeared. Saint Peter and his mecha masters have not even reacted yet. Even if they reacted, with the performance of their mechas, it is impossible to catch up. My lord Duke. They are running too fast. An A-level mecha master whispered, if we can use long-range weapons, I'm sure I can stop them. But, yes, without laser weapons, how can we catch up with Xia Xingchen? The other mecha masters also echoed, if we can't catch up, we will block it. Seeing that the Xia Xingchen mecha had turned into a small black dot and was about to disappear from sight, Saint Peter was not panicked at all, with a sneer on his face. Everyone, please rest assured. I guarantee that they can't escape far. Saint Peter immediately informed Athena of the direction of Xia Xingchen's escape through the communicator, and he took 12 mecha masters and slowly chased after him. At this moment, the speed of Xia Xingchen mecha and thunder mecha has reached the limit. They rushed all the way and arrived at the entrance of the space tunnel in a blink of an eye. Not good. Seeing the scene in front of him, Xia Xingchen's pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip. At the entrance of the space tunnel, there were hundreds of robot beasts. These robot beasts were 1 meter tall and looked a bit like ferocious beasts. Their claws were sharp and their fangs were intertwined in their mouths, flashing cold light. The most important thing is that they didn't carry any long-range weapons on their bodies. It was obvious that Athena had improved the design again after suffering a great loss from the god's gold and made this kind of robot beast that is good at close combat. Although it is unknown how powerful this kind of robot beast is, based on the huge number of the opponent, Xia Xingchen and Kirissa can't get out of here, even if they use all their strength. What should I do? After resting, Popovich's face became much ruddy. Seeing that the situation was not good, he came over and asked, maybe we can't get through. Xia Xingchen shook his head, his expression a little gloomy. If my magneto mech is not broken, we should be able to charge through with the combined strength of the 3 of us. Popovich sighed. He had deep feelings for magneto mech, but this mech was completely scrapped, and even the A-level weapon alloy double rings he carefully crafted were lost. Don't forget, there's still me. Lester was an optimist. Although the atmosphere in the cockpit of the Xia Xingchen mech was a bit depressing, he still had a smile on his face. Lester was a B-level mech master, and his combat effectiveness was not comparable to Popovich's S-level mech master. However, Lester was a martial arts master, and had been immersed in ancient boxing all his life. If it was a laser gun exchange, Lester would not be able to exert much strength. However, if it was a close combat, Lester would fully exert his martial arts, and his combat effectiveness would even be higher than that of an ordinary A-level mech master. And, there's still me. William hesitated for a while, and finally mustered up the courage to say. But, you don't have a mech. Xia Xingchen was very helpless and sighed. If there are no mechas, go find some. This is Luban Xingzhang. There are factories and mechas in the workshops. Popovich reminded. Old man, you don't understand the situation. Xia Xingchen pointed to the location of the street lamps on both sides of the road and said, look at this. Popovich looked over curiously and saw that the street lamps were broken from the base. There were obvious teeth marks at the broken part, as if they were bitten off by something. Popovich was shocked and asked in surprise, what's going on? Xia Xingchen explained. To make so many mechanical beasts, a lot of resources are needed, especially steel. Not to mention the mechas in the factory, even the hovercrafts on the roadside and the steel street lamps have been dismantled by these mechanical bastards to make more companions. I guess their next step is to dismantle the satellite. I remember that the number 3 satellite was built with steel and concrete. Locusts. After a long silence, Lester uttered 2 words. These cold mecha beasts reminded him of greedy locusts. If you have mechas, maybe we can still fight. But, let alone mechas, it's hard to even find a hovercraft. Xia Xingchen shook his head and said. Everyone was silent. There were mechanical beasts in front and pursuers behind. They only had 2 mechas, and could not be opponents at all. Maybe, I know a place with mechas. William suddenly said. Where is it? Xia Xingchen's eyes lit up and asked. I said before. Most of the Mecha Masters of the Mecha Master Association are unwilling to listen to Victor, so they are locked up. Their mechas are also sealed in an underground warehouse. And I know the location of this warehouse. William said. Will these mechas not be destroyed? Popovich asked. It shouldn't be. Because Athena still wants to deceive these Mecha Masters to work for her. Xia Xingchen said very confidently. Let's go. Let's go to this underground warehouse. As long as I have Mecha, I can kill these little bastards. Popovich was very upset when he was chased and beaten by the juniors, and he said loudly, "Old man, let's do it." Xia Xingchen immediately turned the direction of the Xia Xingchen Mecha and flew towards the center of satellite number 3 under William's guidance. St. Peter mobilized almost all the Mecha Masters of the Mecha Master Association to hunt down Xia Xingchen. At this moment, there were only 2D level Mecha Masters at the door of the underground warehouse. Chapter 812. Selecting a Mecha. Boom. Xianheng Mech and Thunder Mech landed in front of the open space of the underground warehouse like a demon. The 2D class Mech Masters in charge of the guard were slightly startled and quickly pressed the alarm. The shrill alarm sounded, breaking the silent air. At this moment, Xia Xingchen didn't care about the alarm at all, because his whereabouts had long been exposed. The pursuers were not far behind him. "You, who are you? Put down your weapons." The 2D class Mech Masters didn't know Xia Xingchen's identity yet. Xia Xingchen didn't answer. A cold look flashed across his face. He tilted his head and whispered, "Klissa." The Thunder Mech instantly moved behind the 2 guards, and 2 steel palms flashed blowlight arcs and were placed on the back of the mech. Crackling. Sparks flew from the mechas of the 2 guards. Klissa released a high voltage, which instantly short-circuited the internal circuits of the mechas and made them lose their ability to move. The lives of the 2 Mech Masters were not in danger, but they were electrocuted. Their mechas were not seriously damaged, and Xia Xingchen could repair them in a few minutes. This was all arranged by Xia Xingchen. Although these Mecha Masters betrayed the Galactic Empire and were all traitors. However, Xia Xingchen was not going to hurt their lives. The Northern Empire and the Galactic Empire were still the same country before the official declaration of war. The relationship between the two was extremely close. Even Xia Xingchen had many friends in the north. For example, Vitus, the commander-in-chief of the Third Fleet. They just served their respective masters. When they met on the battlefield, they would of course fight hard. However, if the war stopped, they would still be good friends. This is a soldier. Moreover, Xia Xingchen could feel that behind the civil war between the Northern Empire and the Galactic Empire, there was the shadow of the silent activities of the gods. Godjin, Athena, and Nicholas were becoming more and more stupid and tyrannical, and these things were very abnormal. Xia Xingchen deeply suspected that the gods were hiding in the shadows of Xingqian and planning a huge conspiracy. Although he didn't know the specific reasons, Xia Xingchen could guess that the ultimate goal of the gods was to completely eliminate mankind. Wipe the human race from the vast sea of stars. All people are chess pieces in the hands of the gods, including the 2 unconscious D-class Mecha Masters in front of him. William left the cockpit of the Xianheng Mecha and came to the underground warehouse. He opened the door of the warehouse with his fingerprint and iris, and immediately a deep passage was revealed. The entrance of the tunnel is not large, and at most 2 mechas can pass through at the same time. William introduced. This underground warehouse was originally built as a nuclear shelter. There is only one entrance. The walls around are made of steel. They are 10 meters thick. Even a nuclear bomb cannot blow it open. Xia Xingchen saw that this place was easy to defend and difficult to attack. He nodded and turned to Carissa and said, "You stay at the entrance and guard here. Try to buy as much time as possible. We will probably need an hour." "Master, don't worry. It's just 1 hour. Carissa can do it." Carissa showed an innocent smile on her face, full of confidence. "Xingchen, you let a little girl guard here. Isn't it too cruel? Xia, you couldn't bear it." "Dad, I believe in Klissa." Xia Xingchen's eyes also revealed a look of reluctance. The main purpose of Xia Xingchen bringing Klissa out this time was to let this little girl who had never left the coffin star come out to relax and experience the wonders of the universe. However, he did not expect that he would encounter such dangerous things as the awakening of Lubin Star's artificial intelligence and the riot of robots. Xia Xingchen was thankful. Thanks to Klissa, otherwise, with Xia Xingchen's strength alone, he would not have been able to sneak into the interior of satellite number 3 and rescue his father. Time was running out. Everyone had no room to consider. Klissa, who had the strongest combat power, drove the Thunder Mech to guard the entrance. The Xianheng Mech led everyone through the tunnel and came to the underground warehouse. The structure of the nuclear shelter was not complicated, and with William leading the way, after opening a huge steel gate at the end of the tunnel, they finally reached the core area. This is a huge space with 60 or 70 mechas of different shapes parked. The mechas in the Mecha Master Association are basically all custom made by large military enterprises, and a small number of them are modified models that have been modified based on military mechas as prototypes. The performance of these mechas far exceeds the mass-produced mechas produced by military factories, but their stability is much worse and the operation is more difficult. It is very difficult for Popovich and Lester to choose a mecha that suits them from these mechas in a short period of time. William is a B-class mecha master, although his combat power is pitifully weak compared to Xia Xingchen, and he is not even a match for him. In fact, he has a very high status in the Mecha Master Association. Moreover, William has an excellent memory and knows all these mechas well. He patiently introduces the performance of the mechas to Popovich and Lester. The Shinto mecha is strong and fast. It is a melee mecha suitable for power users. The light energy mecha is equipped with a solar energy converter and has excellent endurance. It is suitable for space combat. However, even though Popovich is an experienced S-class mecha master, he is dazzled at this moment. Not to mention Lester, who looked at this mecha, touched that mecha, liked them all, but was not satisfied with any of them. Old man, you still want a mecha related to magnetic power, right? Xia Xingchen was also very interested in the modified and customized mechas with different performances in front of him, but he knew that now was not the time to discuss the performance of the mecha. That's right. Popovich nodded and said, I do want a mecha with similar performance to Magneto's mecha. It will be more comfortable to drive. Old man, you think too much. Xia Xingchen shook his head. You know how rare your magnetic ability is. Even in the entire galaxy, it is difficult to find people with similar abilities as you. Besides, we don't have time to slowly choose. You should choose a mecha of an S-class mecha master or an A-class mecha master. The performance parameters are high enough and the operation mode is relatively simple. You are right. Popovich woke up, as if from a dream, and agreed with Xia Xingchen's statement. Xingchen, you are a mecha maintenance master. You have more say than me in mecha performance. Which mecha do you think is suitable for me? This mecha, its name is Glory. Its performance parameters are all good. Its owner should be an A-class mecha master, otherwise it is impossible to fully bring out the performance of the mecha. Xia Xingchen pointed to a Scarlet mecha not far away. He just looked at the weapons and equipment carried on the mecha with his naked eyes, and he knew the approximate parameters in his mind. That's right. The Glory mecha is the mecha of A-level mecha master Aoyang Yao. Its parameters and performance are top-notch in the entire Mecha Master Association. William looked at Xia Xingchen in astonishment and was full of admiration for his vision. Chapter 813 Debut. Okay, this Glory mech. Popovich's heart was uncontrollably excited, and even his blood was boiling. He couldn't wait to drive this Glory mech to knock down all the pursuers outside. The Glory mech is equipped with an identification device that can self-identify the identity of the Mecha Master. However, Xia Xingchen removed the identification device in a few seconds, and the whole process took less than 10 minutes. William was stunned. The structure of the mecha is very complicated, especially the custom mecha, which contains the designer's wonderful ideas. The structure of each mecha is different. But Xia Xingchen took apart the Glory mech and removed the identification device so easily. It can be seen that Xia Xingchen has already understood the internal structure of the mecha, reaching the point of butchering a cow. Popovich entered the cockpit of the Glory mech, put on the mental force sensing helmet, and did a few simple movements to help him familiarize himself with the performance of the mecha. It's good, but it's still not as good as Magneto's mecha. Popovich sighed. Old man, just be content. After all, I have optimized Magneto's mecha for you. Now there is really no time to make more improvements. Just make do with it. Xia Xingchen said with a smile. Xingchen, which mecha should I drive? Lester picked for a long time, but couldn't find a mecha that suited him, and he was a little anxious. Well, I suggest this mecha. Xia Xingchen pointed to a golden mecha that was obviously taller than the other mechas, and turned to ask William, what's its name, and what are its characteristics? William took a look, and showed a surprised look on his face. It's called King Kong, and the driver is a noble dude, just a sea level mecha master. The power attribute of the King Kong mecha is not bad, but the other parameters are a bit low. However, the dude doesn't care about this at all. He only cares about being cool, big, and eye-catching. Lester is old, and is not interested in fancy mechas. He also thinks that the King Kong mecha's paint is too ostentatious. He frowned and said, Xingchen, the mecha you picked for me doesn't look very good. Don't worry. Xia Xingchen raised the multifunctional mechanical arm and said with a smile, at least, its size is big enough. Big enough. The three people present all showed puzzled eyes. The larger the size of the mecha, the more weapons and equipment it can carry, and the stronger its combat effectiveness. But on the battlefield, this is not a good thing. The bigger the body, the more clumsy it is, and it is easy to be besieged by the enemy. However, Xia Xingchen didn't care about this small shortcoming at all. What he really wanted to do was to modify this King Kong mecha, let it carry the mental power paint, and become a painted mecha. It would take Xia Xingchen at least a week to make even the simplest paint. But don't forget that Xia Xingchen still has a set of paint in his hand. Mental power paint, strength. Xia Xingchen's debut. Originally, Xia Xingchen planned to come to Lu Bangxing's auction to sell this set of paint. Unexpectedly, it came in handy now. It only takes less than 10 minutes to equip the mecha with paint, which is equivalent to putting a new layer of paint on the surface of the mecha. In a blink of an eye, Xia Xingchen's debut was mounted on the King Kong mecha. So ugly. If I were to drive this broken thing, I would rather die. Lester looked at the shape of King Kong, covered his eyes with his palms, and couldn't bear to look directly. Xingchen, what did you do? What is that thing? How come it looks like two plasters? Popovich couldn't help but burst out laughing. William also had a stern face and tried hard to hold back his laughter in front of Xia Xingchen. Xia Xingchen jumped off the King Kong mecha and stood far away to look at it. He was also speechless. The original spray paint of the King Kong mecha was gold, which was the dark gold color that Navo-Rish liked the most, known as Tycoon Gold. The design idea of the entire King Kong mecha was also long arms and short legs, like a giant gorilla. However, the power paint was dark red, and there were floating mysterious lines. In theory, the lines on the paint have a special beauty. However, these two paints are Xia Xingchen's debut works, so they are inevitably a bit rough. At first glance, these lines look a bit like graffiti by elementary school students. The most important thing is that the position where the power paint is mounted is also problematic. It is the lower back position of the mecha. From a distance, the whole mecha looks like a big monkey with a red bottom. No wonder Lester was extremely dissatisfied with the appearance of the mecha, and even felt ashamed, and was unwilling to drive this mecha. Xia Xingchen blushed slightly and defended, what's wrong with the ugly shape? As long as it is strong. Besides, it only needs to be replaced with a layer of red spray paint, isn't it? Strong? How strong can a sea-level mecha be? Popovich sneered at Xia Xingchen's statement. Of course, Popovich did not despise Xia Xingchen, but despised the sea-level mecha master. Old man, you can't say that. Xia Xingchen shook his head. Whether he is strong or weak, you will know after you try it with Uncle Lester. Him? Popovich laughed. Ask Lester yourself, is he my opponent? Not to mention that he drives such a red-bottomed monkey. Even if I lend him my Magneto mecha, I drive an ordinary mecha. Do you think he can win? Lester's face flushed. Popovich, don't be so arrogant, old man. If you have the ability, let's not drive the mecha and come down to fight hand to hand. Do you believe I can beat you into a pig's head? Boom. At this time, a huge explosion came from the passage. Although the nuclear shelter was buried deep underground, the ground still shook violently. Obviously, St. Peter had already chased after them with the mecha division and fought with Kirissa, who was guarding the entrance. Stop bickering, the two of you. We really don't have time. Xia Xingchen glanced in the direction of the entrance, his heart full of anxiety. Okay, I'll listen to Starboy for a while. Lester was unhappy and got into the cockpit of the King Kong mecha. After putting on the mental force sensing helmet, Lester suddenly felt a shock, and he immediately felt the difference of the King Kong mecha. How is it possible? After doing a few simple movements, Lester was stunned, and then an incredible look appeared on his face. The feeling of driving the King Kong mecha was completely different from Lester's previous driving of other mechas. This feeling of being able to control it at all made Lester ecstatic. Moreover, what shocked Lester the most was that he could feel a surging force coming from the King Kong mecha from the lower back. This extremely terrifying power made Lester feel that he could shatter the planet. Chapter 814. Discussion. Old man, come on, let's practice a few moves together. Lester was very excited and waved at Popovic. I'm an S-class mecha master, how can I be afraid of you? Don't worry, I will stop when I'm done. Popovic laughed and accepted everyone who came. The best way to get familiar with a mecha is to fight. They are about to fight a life and death battle. If they are not familiar with the mecha, fighting the enemy is no different from committing suicide. Knowing that Carissa is struggling in the front, Popovic and Lester also want to practice together in order to get familiar with the mecha as soon as possible and then go to support Carissa. There are not many words. Popovic and Lester are very tacit, and they attack at the same time. Boom. The two Mechas of Glory and King Kong collided with each other in an instant like rhinos, holding their forehands, and their foreheads seemed to touch each other. Wrestling like a bull. This method of competition is the most direct. It allows the mecha master to fully exert the performance of the mecha. Popovic originally looked down on Lester. After all, Popovic, as an S-class mecha master, has a much higher mental power level than Lester, a B-class mecha master. Originally, Popovic only used 50% of his strength, wanting to give Lester some face and make his loss less ugly. However, the moment the two mechas collided and began to wrestle, Popovic immediately felt a mountain-like pressure that enveloped him. Impossible. Popovic was extremely shocked. He felt that he was not facing a mecha, but a towering mountain. Boom boom boom. The glory mecha was pushed back 3 steps by the huge force of the King Kong mecha. Each step was extremely heavy, and even the steel cast ground was trampled with deep footprints. This power is wrong. Seeing that he was at a disadvantage, Popovic did not dare to neglect it. Finally, he became serious, with sharp eyes, and used all his strength to stabilize his body. Old man, you didn't expect it. Lester laughed, and his heart was extremely excited. Over the years, Lester has never beaten Popovic in mecha, not even once. Lester is a martial arts master. For a warrior, the most important thing is the desire to win. No matter what moves Lester uses, he can't beat Popovic. You can imagine how depressed he is. However, Lester finally feels that he is finally going to taste the sweet taste of victory that he has not seen for a long time. Painting skills. Power. Lester's eyes suddenly burst into a red brilliance. He poured all his mental power into the mecha painting. Immediately, the power of the King Kong mecha soared again, and the shell flashed with gorgeous light and color. Tang Biquan, Dashan Pai Gua. Lester's mecha is called King Kong. As the name suggests, it is designed based on the prototype of monkeys, with long arms and short legs, and infinite strength. Lester is proficient in all human martial arts, and is also familiar with Tang Biquan. He uses a trick in Tang Biquan, and the King Kong mecha stretches out its long arms and smashes down hard on the neck of the glory mecha. What a fierce boxing technique. Xia Xingchen's eyelids jumped, and a look of shock appeared on his face. Xia Xingchen had always wanted to combine Chinese ancient martial arts with mecha combat. However, Xia Xingchen was young after all. Even though he had good talent, he had not spent enough time immersed in martial arts. He was still far from being like Lester, who could easily master any martial arts and act like a master. In mecha close combat, mecha masters would also use combat skills. However, combat skills were not real martial arts, but at best a miniature and simplified version of martial arts. After all, the body of mecha is made of steel, not a human body. Joint skills and weak point attacks in martial arts could not be applied to mechas at all. After watching Lester's battle, Xia Xingchen realized that it was not that martial arts could not be used in mecha battles. In the final analysis, it was because his martial arts skills were too weak. Lester's move seemed simple, just a flat smash, without any fancy moves. But in the eyes of those who know it, this move is a return to the original, containing infinite mysteries and the essence of thousands of years of ancient Chinese martial arts. Popovich's reaction was fast enough, and he raised his arm to block this move. However, Popovich was not driving his own Magneto mech after all, but a new mech that he had never touched before. Therefore, Popovich was always half a second slower in his movements in astonishment. Popovich closed his eyes in despair. He could clearly feel that Lester's move contained unparalleled power, which could easily penetrate the armor of the Glory mech and smash the cockpit. 3 seconds later, Popovich found that nothing happened. He opened his eyes and saw that Lester had already retracted his move and was winking at him. Lester's martial arts had reached the realm of being able to send and receive freely. The move just now stopped only half a meter away from the Glory mech and then retracted. I lost. Although Popovich was unwilling to admit defeat, he was a frank person. Losing is losing, winning is winning. What's more, Lester was his good friend, so it was not shameful to lose. Lester laughed. Old man, you admitted defeat very quickly. But after all, you are not driving your own mecha. I won unfairly. Let's do this. Wait for Xia Xingchen to help you build a mecha again. We will compete again. Popovich snorted and said unconvinced, don't worry, I will only lose to you once in my life. That time just now. In the future, I will never lose again. Pa pa pa. At this time, the sound of applause rang out. Xia Xingchen walked over while clapping and said sincerely, the fight between the two of you really opened my eyes. Especially Uncle Lester, you can actually combine mecha and martial arts. I admire you very much. Xia Xingchen said the truth. Although Lester did not teach Xia Xingchen martial arts, in his words, Xia Xingchen's martial arts attainments were already very high, and he could not teach him with his level. However, Xia Xingchen still learned a lot from Lester teaching others martial arts. To Xia Xingchen, Lester is not only his elder, a warrior worthy of respect, but also a master. Lester smiled and said, Xingchen, you must not admire me. I should admire you. What did you do to this mecha? Why is its performance so outstanding? Yes, Xingchen, what did you do? This Glory mecha must crush King Kong in terms of performance parameters. But why don't I even have a chance to fight back? Popovich urged repeatedly, with an anxious look on his face. This is the power of technology. Xia Xingchen said slowly, after the King Kong mecha is equipped with spiritual power coating, it has become a coated mecha different from ordinary mechas. The technological level is a whole era ahead. Chapter 815 Galaxy Ranking. The power of technology. Popovich, Lester, and William all showed shock on their faces. Xia Xingchen's words set off a storm in their hearts. Although it was a little hard to believe, they had to admit it. Every great leap forward in human society was brought about by new technology. There is a proverb circulating in the Galactic Empire, only scientists can create history. Although the three were shocked by the power of technology, they had different ideas. Popovich's thinking was more conservative. He lamented that technology was developing too fast, leaving old people like him behind. If he didn't try hard to catch up, even if he was an S-class mecha master, he would be abandoned by the times. Lester was extremely excited. He personally experienced the benefits of technology, which made his martial arts no longer a dragon slaying skill, and finally had a place to use them. As for William, he thought even more. William wanted to escape from the dangerous Luban Star and return to his hometown of Terrastar. Inform his family of this important information. Only in this way can the William family take the lead in the great changes that are about to happen in the future, and after ensuring their position, they can further gain more benefits. Boom boom boom. There was another violent explosion outside. Xia Xingchen's face showed worry. Let's go. It's almost time. Kirisa may not be able to hold on. After Xia Xingchen finished speaking, he rushed into the passage and ran towards the entrance. Okay, let's go. Popovich and Lester drove the Glory and King Kong mechas and followed closely behind. William chose a modified Fiju mecha to follow at the end. The performance of the Fiju mecha was average, but the speed was still good. William was ready to escape. William didn't think that Xia Xingchen, Popovich, and Lester were the opponents of St. Peter and his men. William had already made up his mind. When the two groups of people fought, he would take advantage of the chaos to escape. Although there were still many mechanical beasts outside, William was confident that with his ability as a B-level mecha master, he still had a chance to break out of the siege. At this moment, outside the underground warehouse, Kirisa was driving the Thunder Mecha to fight with 3 mechas. The drivers of these 3 mechas are all A-class mecha masters, and they are so powerful that they can fight Kirisa on equal terms. On the Kanglang mecha, St. Peter watched coldly from the side and had no intention of taking action at all. This little girl is so strong. Where did she come from? Besides St. Peter, Victor's face was uncertain, and there was shock in his eyes. HMPH, who knows? With the universe being so big, it's normal for 1 or 2 geniuses to appear. St. Peter snorted coldly, turned to Victor and said, "Have I arranged for you to do it?" Victor said quickly, "I have never neglected anything arranged by the Duke. All the imprisoned mecha masters are now being taken to the transport plane and are heading here." "That's good." St. Peter nodded lightly, and a cold look appeared on his handsome face. "I want to kill a chicken to scare the monkeys, so that those mecha masters who don't know how to raise their heads will see how miserable the death of those who resist me will be." Victor shivered involuntarily, and his back was already covered with cold sweat. At this time, a small transport plane flew over. There were more than 40 mecha masters sitting in the cabin, with shackles on their hands. Most of them had bruises on their noses and faces, and were obviously beaten. The transport plane landed, and these mecha masters were driven out like livestock, kneeling on an open space, with their hands tied behind their backs. Victor saw the transport plane coming, and the mecha landing. He walked in front of the mecha masters with a smile on his face. "Please be patient, wait a minute, there will be a good show for everyone to watch." Kneeling in the front was a black-haired man with a scar on his face. He looked very brave. He spat fiercely on Victor's face and cursed, "Victor, you traitor, assassinated the president, betrayed the country. I, Bao Yang Yao, wish I could eat your bones and sleep with your skin." The other mecha masters also followed Bao Yang Yao and cursed, denouncing Victor's shamelessness. Victor didn't say anything. His face was gloomy and seemed to be dripping with water, and his right hand was slightly raised. Bang! A gun-wielding guard next to Ao Yang Yao raised his laser rifle and hit him hard on the cheek with the butt of the rifle, making a muffled sound. Boom! Ao Yang Yao fell to the ground like a piece of wood and fainted. Victor asked someone to bring a bucket of cold water and pour it on Ao Yang Yao's head to wake him up again. Ao Yang Yao's face was already bloody, and the blood flowing from his mouth was mixed with broken teeth. Suddenly, the mecha masters dared not make a noise, but just raised their heads and looked at Victor with hatred. "Ao Yang Yao, because we are former partners, I will not kill you this time. But there will definitely not be a next time." Victor sneered. "Next, I will show you a good show. Let you know what the end will be if you go against the Northern Empire." At this moment, the mecha master saw a tall silver mecha fighting fiercely with 3 A-level mecha masters above their heads. The speed of the silver mecha was extremely fast, and their eyes were instantly attracted. Which S-level mecha master is it? He can fight with 3 A-level mecha masters at the same time, and not lose the upper hand? No. S-level mecha masters don't have this strength either. It may be a legendary mecha master. The faces of the mecha masters were full of shock. In the entire Galactic Empire, there are no more than 10 legendary mecha masters still active. Moreover, these legendary figures are elusive and elusive, and they behave in a low-key manner, so it is difficult for ordinary people to see them. The speed of the mecha is so fast. Could it be Halley, the 9th legendary mecha master, the Comet? I don't think so. I once had the honor of seeing a picture of Halley's Comet mecha. It is completely different from the shape of this silver mecha. I think it looks a bit like the 7th legendary fire meteor. The mecha masters are all speculating about Kirisa's identity. In the Mecha Master Association, there is a list of legendary mecha masters, called the Galaxy List. The Galaxy List is the top 10 legendary mecha masters. Of course, this ranking may not represent the real combat power of the mecha masters. It is a rough list inferred by some people in the Mecha Master Association through data and combat power analysis. This list actually has no practical significance, it only represents the reputation and glory of the legendary Mecha Masters. However, there is a group of people who are busy arguing about this list every day, and even fighting each other to the point of bleeding. As time went by, some legendary Mecha Masters also paid great attention to their rankings on the list. However, they did not have many opportunities to actually fight and compete with each other. Comet Halley and Fire Meteor Duruoxy, ranked 9th and 7th on the Galaxy list respectively, were both recently promoted to legendary Mecha Masters and were in the limelight. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 816 Thunderfall. The one driving the Silver Mecha is not a legendary Mecha Master, so you don't have to guess. Victor smiled and revealed the answer. She should be an S-class Mecha Master. She is Xia Xingchen's apprentice. You should have heard of the name Xia Xingchen. Ah, Xia Xingchen? All the Mecha Masters were slightly stunned. A younger Mecha Master was the first to react and said, I know. Xia Xingchen, the war hero of the Galactic Empire. My sister is his fan. Hearing this, the other Mecha Masters also reacted and said that they knew Xia Xingchen. It is said that Xia Xingchen's life is a legend. It only took a few years for him to go from a minor to a school officer of the Empire. Moreover, Xia Xingchen is also a powerful Mecha Master. The most exaggerated record is that he alone destroyed the elite troops of the Northern Empire, the Snow Demon Knights, and even the Regent Andre was killed by him. Xia Xingchen is also on Lubenstar. Now we are saved. Yes, Xia Xingchen has a nickname, the man who creates miracles. He will definitely create miracles again. The power of role models is infinite, especially in difficult situations. Role models are like a ray of hope in the darkness, guiding the direction of everyone. The eyes of the Mecha Masters all lit up, and said one after another, Humph. Victor sneered. This is exactly what he wanted. He just wanted to ignite the fire of hope in the hearts of these Mecha Masters. Then, he would cruelly extinguish the fire of hope. By then, these Mecha Masters would be ashamed and might give up their worthless loyalty to the Empire and stand on his side. Wait a minute, I will let Xia Xingchen die in front of you. This is a good show. Everyone, open your eyes wide and watch. Victor said loudly, looking up at the sky, where the Thunder Mecha was fighting fiercely with 3 A-level Mecha Masters, and it was faintly gaining the upper hand. You three go too. If you still can't win, it means you are all useless. Saint Peter glanced coldly at the 3 A-class Mecha Masters around him and ordered, Yes, Your Excellency the Duke. The 3 A-class Mecha Masters nodded immediately and drove their mechas to join the battle. Even Kirissa didn't have the ability to deal with 6 A-class Mecha Masters at the same time, and she immediately fell out of danger. Boom. Kirissa was in a panic, and a mecha found a flaw, kicked the Thunder Mecha in the back, kicked it down from midair, and fell to the ground with a loud noise. The dust just flew up. The Thunder Mecha rushed out of the dust and continued to fight. Kirissa's face was pale, blood was flowing from the corner of her mouth, and with anger in her eyes, she shouted at Saint Peter, Saint Peter, you coward. If you have the guts, come and fight me squarely. You are not a hero if you use your numbers to bully the few. Saint Peter smiled coldly, with a look of disdain on his face. A defeated general, are you worthy of challenging me? You can talk about it after you can beat these trash. Okay. Kirissa shouted in a low voice, and there seemed to be magma surging in the depths of her red pupils. Whoosh. The Thunder Mech activated thunder and its speed suddenly increased. It turned into a stream of light and rushed towards the nearest A-level Mech Master. This A-level Mech Master was called Jim, and he was driving a modified Mech of the Space Knight. He didn't react at all, and the Thunder Mech with blowups all over its body was already in front of him. Swish. A 6-meter long arc-shaped sword appeared out of thin air from the Thunder Mech's hand, and with a horizontal slash, Jim and the Mech were about to be cut into 2 pieces. A bunch of rubbish. You still need me to take action. Ice 1000 miles. St. Peter cursed and suddenly raised his hands in the air. Crack, crack, crack. A thick layer of ice suddenly formed on the shell of the thunder mech, and its speed slowed down. St. Peter, you actually attacked me. You clearly said. Kirissa was full of anger and shouted loudly. Humph, didn't you want me to take action? Now that I have taken action, why are you unhappy? Little girl, you are a bit moody. St. Peter smiled coldly. Puff. While St. Peter performed Dice 1000 miles, the speed of the thunder mech suddenly slowed down. A mech holding a laser sword attacked from behind, piercing into the back of Thunder, and a dazzling beam of light pierced from the chest. Bang! Kirissa used a move from Take Eye to force the mech behind her to retreat. The entire cockpit was filled with red lights flashing and piercing alarms. The cold mechanical sound reminded Kirissa that the Thunder Mecha was seriously damaged, so she abandoned the machine and fled. Damn it. Kirissa had deep feelings for the Thunder Mecha. Although she was reluctant to give up this mecha, she also knew that the Thunder Mecha would explode in the next moment. Kirissa's face was full of resentment, and her white palm slammed hard on the red button on the control panel. The cockpit immediately ejected from the chest of the mecha, deployed a parachute in midair, and slowly fell to the ground. Fire. Kill her. St. Peter gave the order without any hesitation, and immediately shot Kirissa, the unarmed little girl who had lost her combat ability. Your Excellency the Duke, the other party has lost the mecha. According to the prisoner of war treaty, we cannot. Several mecha divisions around St. Peter all showed hesitation. What a bunch of rubbish. St. Peter cursed again. The Kanglang mech waved its hand, and the temperature around it suddenly dropped. A sharp ice sword appeared in the mecha's hand. The tip of the sword was already placed on the cockpit of a Class B mech next to it. He said in a deep voice, shoot immediately, or you will be the one to die. The Class B mech was terrified and sweating. He could only operate the mech, took off the laser rifle from his shoulder, aimed at the cockpit in the air, and pulled the trigger. Whoosh. A purple beam of light went up diagonally, and it was about to penetrate the cockpit. At this moment, a black mech suddenly appeared, hugged the cockpit with both hands, rolled in the air, and landed steadily on the ground. Master. In the cockpit, Kirissa felt relieved. In fact, she was not afraid at all, because she knew that the master would definitely appear in time to save her. Xia Xingchen directly docked the two cockpits and let Kirissa come to the cockpit of the Xia Xingchen mecha. Seeing that she was safe and sound, Xia Xingchen breathed a sigh of relief. Kirissa, I'm glad you're not hurt. If Kirissa had any accident, not to mention that Xia Xingchen would not be able to explain to Meredith, he would never forgive himself in this life. With tears in her eyes, Kirissa looked at the tattered and scrapped Thunder Mecha and said in a trembling voice, I'm fine, but my Thunder was damaged by these bad guys. Chapter 817, The Flaws of Xia Xingchen Mecha. It doesn't matter. It's okay if the mecha is broken, as long as the people are fine. Although the Thunder is very powerful, it is just an electric type painted mecha, and it is not really suitable for you. When I have time, I will design and manufacture a new mecha suitable for you. Xia Xingchen persuaded softly. Master, this is what you said. Your Xia Xingchen mecha is so powerful, I have been envious of it for a long time. Kirissa was innocent and immediately burst into laughter. Well, Kirissa, you take a rest first. Watch how I teach these bastards a lesson. Xia Xingchen's eyes fell on the Kanglang mecha. At the same time, St. Peter was looking at Xia Xingchen with a smile on his face. Xia Xingchen, you finally showed up. Last time, I suffered humiliation on the Manastar. This time I will take it back double. Xia Xingchen smiled coldly. I'm going to get back the account of Thunder Mecha from you. How shameless. St. Peter laughed, with a crazy look on his handsome face. You are just a B-class mecha master, relying on the mecha equipped with paint. You can bully these mechas of the old era. Why do you fight me? I don't even need to make a move. You can't even beat these trash under my men. And us. In the underground warehouse, King Kong and Glory rushed out, and the two mechas stood in midair, standing shoulder to shoulder with the Xia Xingchen mecha. You are Popovic. St. Peter's eyes fell on the Glory mech. His pupils suddenly shrank, and his face was filled with astonishment. Popovich, you didn't die in that nuclear explosion. I'm a tortoise, and I have a long life. I can't die until you die. Popovich laughed. Madden, this rubbish. Can't even handle such a small matter. Saint Peter was furious. He found the wreckage of Magneto's mech in the center of the nuclear explosion. He took it for granted that Popovich had been killed by Madden. Who would have thought that Popovich changed a mech and appeared again? But it doesn't matter. Although Popovich is an S-class mecha master, however, his own mecha has been scrapped, and the mecha he is driving belongs to someone else. His own strength is only 70% at most. It is equivalent to an A-class mecha master. In addition, the old man named Lester beside Popovich is a B-class mecha master, and Xia Xingchen is at best A-class. There is no way he can be the opponent of 6 A-class mecha masters. Saint Peter thought for a while, and his mood became relaxed again. He waved his hand and said, "Kill the 3 of them. Princess Athena will reward you heavily." The 6 A-class mecha masters had been fighting for a long time, and were in good shape. When they heard Saint Peter's order, they immediately rushed up, and surrounded Xia Xingchen, Popovich, and Lester in the middle. 2 old men, "I'll deal with the S-class mecha master Saint Peter. You take care of these 6 A-class mecha masters." Xia Xingchen whispered. "Xingchen, can you do it? The opponent is an S-class mecha master, and he is also driving a painted mecha. Even your apprentice is no match for him." Popovich was a little doubtful. "Why not? Let me deal with him. I'm 60% sure that I can entangle him." "Old man, have you heard the story of Shanji's horse racing?" "Of course I know that my strength is actually the lowest among the 3. So, I'm the inferior horse. You guys make a quick decision and come to help me." Xia Xingchen was not conceited, but because this was the only feasible tactic under the disadvantage. "Okay, Xingchen, you must hold on. Wait for us." Popovich nodded. "Saint Peter." Xia Xingchen roared, and the Xianheng mecha turned into a long rainbow that shot backwards and rushed towards the Kanglang mecha. "Stupid." Saint Peter looked contemptuous and did not take Xia Xingchen seriously at all. He ordered 6 A-class mecha masters, "Stop him. Your opponent is us." Popovich and Lester shouted at the same time, driving the mecha to stop the A-class mecha master. Instantly, a fierce battle broke out. Taking advantage of the gap created by Popovich and Lester, the purple thrusters behind the Xianheng mecha turned into purple wings and quickly rushed to the front of the Kanglang mecha. Boom. The enhanced skill was activated. The right fist of the Xianheng mecha flashed with dazzling yellow light and punched the Kanglang mecha. Xia Xingchen knew very well that Saint Peter was extremely insidious. He said he would not take action, but in fact he was waiting for an opportunity to kill with one blow. Kirissa was too naive, so she fell for Saint Peter's trick. Of course, the way of war is to be treacherous. If Xia Xingchen could not entangle Saint Peter, then if he took action, both Popovich and Lester would be in danger. Ice for 1,000 miles. Saint Peter also understood this truth and immediately used the painting skill. Snap, snap, snap. The temperature around the Xianheng mecha suddenly dropped to -50 degrees, and the outer shell of the mecha was covered with icicles. It's the same trick again. Kirissa had suffered from this trick twice, and she still hadn't figured out a way to break it, so she was extremely angry. Use force to break cleverness. Xia Xingchen was not panicked, and his mental power surged out and entered the mental power coating. The 9-meter high Xianheng mecha was emitting dazzling yellow light all over its body. Strength, speed, defense. All the parameters of the mecha immediately skyrocketed, reaching a very terrifying peak state. Boom. The Xianheng mecha suddenly shook, and the ice covering it suddenly flew around. The ice that has been sealed for thousands of miles has been broken. Xia Xingchen, I actually underestimated you. The power of your mecha is really extraordinary. Saint Peter's pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip. As an S-level mecha master with great combat experience, he knew that he could not underestimate the enemy, and he immediately shouted, 10,000 feet ice dragon slash. Crack, crack, crack. A two-handed frost giant sword flashing with deep blue light, reaching a length of 10 meters, even slightly taller than the Kanglang mecha, appeared in the hands of the Kanglang mecha, and chopped towards the Xianheng mecha. Ding. The two iron fists of the Xianheng mecha flashed with yellow light, met the frost giant sword, and burst out with a loud noise. Boom. The Xianheng mecha was defeated. Although it had the bonus of mental shield and enhanced skills, a gap was still cut on its arms, revealing the circuit inside. The Xia Xingchen mecha was also hit by the huge force and flew backwards. It retreated hundreds of meters before it stabilized its body. Master, he has weapons, and you don't. Kirisa looked anxious. If this goes on, you will suffer a lot. Xia Xingchen knew that the Xia Xingchen mecha had a fatal flaw. That is, it had no handy weapons. All along, the Xia Xingchen mecha relied on a pair of fists to fight. With the blessing of enhanced skills, the fists of the Xia Xingchen mecha also have great destructive power. Facing those mechas of the old era, it was extremely powerful. However, when facing the Kanglang mecha, which was also a painted mecha, the flaws of the Xia Xingchen mecha were exposed. Chapter 818 Colorful Dragon Wings. That's no use. Where can I find an A-level weapon now? I can only fight. Xia Xingchen was helpless. Master, have you forgotten that you have an A-level weapon? Kirisa reminded. I almost forgot. Longbow shooting the sun. Xia Xingchen slapped his forehead and suddenly remembered. He immediately took out the longbow engraved with mysterious vine patterns from the mental space and pulled the bowstring to the full moon. Whoosh! An air blade made a piercing whistle and flew towards the Kanglang mecha. The Kanglang mecha held the two-handed giant sword horizontally and blocked the air blade with the sword body, and ice chips flew. A tiny gap appeared on the sword body. The attack worked. Xia Xingchen was excited. Xia Xingchen was no stranger to archery. When he was a child, he often followed his father to the forest to hunt. Damn, what kind of bow is this? It's so powerful. Saint Peter looked at the broken frost giant sword and felt a pain in his heart. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Xia Xingchen was relentless, and the Xia Xingchen mecha fired continuously, shooting 7 or 8 air blades in succession. The Kanglang mecha dodged quickly, making evasive moves in midair, looking embarrassed. After avoiding all the air blades, the Kanglang mecha dragged the huge ice giant sword and chased after the Xia Xingchen mecha. The purple light thrusters immediately turned on at full power, and the purple light wings flashed. Xia Xingchen took advantage of the mecha's speed and escaped far away. When they reached a relatively safe position, the Xia Xingchen mecha immediately pulled the bowstring and shot air blades at the Kanglang mecha. Stinky boy. Looking for death. Colorful dragon wings. Saint Peter was provoked one after another, and he was always calm at this moment. He was extremely angry and let out a loud roar. Whoosh! On the back of the Kanglang mecha, 2 huge ice dragon wings condensed out of thin air. The dragon wings were extremely huge, each of which was 20 meters long, covered with diamond-shaped icicles, reflecting the gorgeous colorful brilliance under the light. The colorful dragon wings not only look cool, but also increase the speed of the Kanglang mecha by more than 30%. Every time they flap, they advance a long distance in the direction of the Xia Xingchen mecha, and the speed is extremely amazing. What kind of equipment is this? Xia Xingchen looked at the colorful dragon wings and was extremely shocked. The purple light wings behind the Xia Xingchen mecha were just phantoms. However, behind the Kanglang mecha, there were real dragon wings. One was virtual and the other was real, and the difference was immediately determined. In desperation, Xia Xingchen could only drive the Xia Xingchen mecha to escape desperately, and there were dangers for a while. On the other side, Popovich and Lester's battle was much easier. Old man, do you want to compete? See who has a higher score? Lester laughed on the King Kong mecha. Let's compete. Who is afraid of who? Popovich just lost a game and was dissatisfied, so he immediately agreed. There is no comparison between the Glory mecha and the Magneto mecha in terms of performance. However, Popovich was an S-class mecha master after all. Relying on his powerful mental power and nearly perfect control skills, he managed to not lose to the attacks of 3 A-class mecha masters. On the ground, the locked mecha masters looked up at this fierce battle, and each of them showed a look of shame. Watching such a high-end mecha battle at such a close distance brought a sense of oppression and shock, which made their hearts full of passion. Aoyang Yeo, isn't that your Glory mecha? A mecha master asked Aoyang Yeo in a low voice. Why is Glory like a snail in your hands? How come it is as light and agile as a swallow in other people's hands? Aoyang Yeo blushed. Nonsense. Who do you think is driving Glory? S-class mecha master Popovich. I'm nothing. How can I compare with an S-class mecha master? Although Yang Yeo said this, he was shocked in his heart. Yang Yeo has been driving this glory mecha for 2 years and has modified it more than 20 times. He has always been a little dissatisfied in his heart, thinking that the performance of the mecha is always a little bit worse. However, Yang Yeo now realized that it was not the poor performance of the mecha, but his own strength. If Yang Yeo was blushing and stubborn, then the owner of the King Kong mecha, Budelin, wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. The same question fell on Budelin, the playboy. Budelin, that mecha, is it your King Kong? But why is it so ugly? What is that thing behind it? A red monkey butt? Budelin gritted his teeth and cursed in a low voice, which bastard stole my mecha? And he spoofed my treasure like this. No matter who it is, if this young master is not dead, he will not be spared. However, at this time, Lester, on the King Kong mecha, was in high spirits and performed the great sage Tongbo fist. The steel skeleton made a loud explosion, like a firecracker. No more, no less, a total of 13 shots. 13 Tongbo fists. The highest realm of Tongbo fist. King Kong stretched out his long arms, and his already long arms seemed to be extended by several meters. He punched a hapless mecha in the chest. Boom. With the addition of the power coating, the power of the King Kong was amazing, even higher than that of the Xia Xingchen mecha. In an instant, the chest of the mecha was pierced, and the engine exploded directly, turning into a ball of fire in the air, and falling to the ground. The situation was originally a stalemate. Because of Lester's success, the balance of victory quickly tilted. Boom. King Kong suddenly jumped in front of a stunned mecha, and destroyed it with another punch. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 6A level mecha masters died. Galaxy, what did I see? On the ground, the mecha masters looked up with shock on their faces. Budlin, your King Kong mecha is so powerful. How can it be so powerful? I underestimated you before. A mecha master said to Budlin. Ah. Really? Budlin was so shocked that his whole body had been frozen, and his eyes were fixed on the King Kong mecha. He was also doubting in his heart that it was obviously his King Kong. However, the combat power displayed actually surpassed that of S-Class Mecha Master Popovich. How is this possible? No. We are no match. Retreat. The remaining 4 A-Class Mecha Masters were chilled when they saw their companions' mechas burning fiercely, and even their bodies were burned to ashes. Facing the strange power of the King Kong mecha, they did not dare to fight again. They ignored the orders of Victor and Saint Peter, and chose to retreat strategically, quickly fleeing to a safe area 2 kilometers away. At this moment, Xia Xingchen was being chased by Saint Peter. Popovich and Lester did not chase the remaining A-Class Mecha Masters, but chose to support Xia Xingchen. Xingchen, here I come. Lester roared, and the King Kong mecha fell from the sky, with his arms stretched out, carrying unparalleled strength, like a mountain, and smashed down fiercely. Chapter 819 Loyalty. Boom. Saint Peter raised the frost giant sword with both hands, and fought with King Kong's fists. It was also a bare-handed fight with a weapon. Xia Xingchen lost. However, Lester won easily. The frost giant sword was shattered by the blast, and instantly covered with spider web-like patterns. The sound of ice breaking was heard, and the next moment, it exploded into ice chips all over the sky. Puff. In the cockpit, Saint Peter was injured by the huge force, and spurted out a mouthful of blood, staining the screen in front of him with blood. Why? Why? You are just a B-level mecha master. Saint Peter looked incredulous, and roared like a beast. Lester did not answer, but chose to continue attacking. At the same time, Popovich also joined the battle, and the 2 besieged Saint Peter. Xia Xingchen stood on the periphery, constantly attacking the Kanglong mecha with the sun-shooting bow, breaking all the colorful ice wings behind it. 1 against 3, your victory is unfair. Saint Peter was already stretched to the limit when dealing with Lester alone, and with Popovich and Xia Xingchen, he had no chance of winning at all, and could only roar in anger. Hey, why does this sound so familiar to me? I think I said that just now. A bright smile appeared on Kirissa's little face. Seeing Saint Peter going crazy, Kirissa was very happy, and said with a smile, what did you do to Kirissa just now? Now it's retribution. Boom. King Kong took the opportunity to punch the Kanglong mecha on the shoulder, and at the same time Xia Xingchen seized this opportunity and shot out an air blade with the sun shooting longbow, which cut fiercely into the cockpit of the Kanglong mecha. Absolute zero. Seeing the glass of the cockpit shattered in the chaotic fire, St. Peter's head was injured, and the scenery in front of him was stained red with blood. He used his best skills. In an instant, the Kanglong mecha condensed into a huge block of ice and fell to the ground. St. Peter froze himself. The thickness of the ice was amazing. King Kong hit the ice several times, but the ice did not move at all, like a piece of diamond. This turtle shell is quite thick. But what's the point of hiding inside it? Lester said with a smile. Run. On the ground, Victor had already seen that something was wrong and had already fled this place with a few followers in a mecha. Lester wanted to chase him, but was stopped by Xia Xingchen. Don't chase the desperate enemy. Besides, those mechanical beasts are approaching. They can't escape. Lester nodded and stopped. The real enemy of mankind is artificial intelligence Athena. As for the scum of the Mecha Master Association, there is no need to worry about it. Let's rescue the Mecha Masters of these associations first. The Xia Xingchen Mecha landed and stopped in front of the locked Mecha Masters. The guards had already run away with Victor. Okay. Popovich and Lester also landed and helped open the shackles on the Mecha Masters. William has been hiding aside, observing the development of things. He originally thought that Xia Xingchen and the other two would not win and were ready to escape at any time. However, what he didn't expect was that Xia Xingchen actually won. At this moment, William came out from his hiding place with a smug smile on his face. William? Who are they? Gao Yao was the most prestigious among the group of people, so he stood up as a matter of course. Oh, they are the ones who came to save us. Colonel Xia Xingchen. His troops are guarding the 13th satellite. There are thousands of mecha divisions fighting with the mechanical army. William explained. Colonel. Troops. Galaxy. We are saved. The mecha divisions were all happy when they heard this exciting news. Colonel. On behalf of all members of the Lubenstar Mecha Division Association, I sincerely thank you. Gao Yao's scarred and swollen face was with a sincere smile. No. I should thank you. Your loyalty to the Empire has withstood the test. Xia Xingchen said seriously with a serious expression. Ha ha ha, loyalty to the Empire. The Mecha divisions all laughed. Xia Xingchen was a little surprised. What are you laughing at? William explained. Colonel, you are a soldier, defending the country, and being loyal to the country. But we are different. We are Mecha divisions, ordinary people, at best a group of mercenaries. There is no loyalty or disloyalty at all. For example, I actually betrayed the Empire. You are deceived. Xia Xingchen shook his head, but they would rather be beaten, killed, and not be subservient or betray. Why is that? Colonel, we don't like the Empire, and we have no loyalty to the country. But, in comparison, we hate the North more. Nicholas, this bastard, is not worthy of our loyalty. The Emperor of the Empire, Qin Zhi, is a cowardly waste. Gao Yao stood up and said. Oh, I understand a little bit. Xia Xingchen nodded. Everyone has their own ideas, which is normal. Even Xia Xingchen himself hates the intrigues in the court and the dirty politics. However, as a soldier, Xia Xingchen has to fall into this political whirlpool for Princess Crossing. This is involuntary. No matter what, you are our savior. All members of the Mecha Division Association will always remember this kindness. Gao Yao said loudly. That's right. Xia Xingchen. Please forgive us for not calling you by your military rank. Because, in front of us, you are not an officer of the Empire. We know very well that you saved us with your own strength. We are grateful to you, not the country. A Mecha division also spoke frankly. Okay. Xia Xingchen didn't want to argue too much about this issue and waved his hand. Although you are temporarily saved, the crisis has not been completely resolved. Countless mecha beasts are eyeing nearby and may rush up at any time. Everyone rest for 10 minutes to recover your strength. Then, we will drive the mecha together to kill. With the combined strength of all of us, it should not be difficult to kill from here to satellite number 13. While the mecha divisions were resting, Xia Xingchen was nervous and drove the Xia Xingchen mecha to a high altitude, overlooking the entire satellite number 3. Xia Xingchen was shocked to find that except for the surrounding area of 10 kilometers, the rest of the entire satellite was filled with dense mecha beasts. The number of these mecha beasts is over 30,000. Just looking at them makes people feel creepy. How can there be so many? Could it be that all the mecha beasts from Luban's 13 satellites have been transferred here? Xia Xingchen was very surprised. Lieutenant Colonel Bartow led nearly 1,000 mecha divisions to defend the 13th satellite. Didn't Athena care? She actually transferred the mechanical army here? This was very unusual. Chapter 820 Retreat. Xianheng mecha landed from the sky. Xia Xingchen walked out of the cockpit. His face was uncertain. The scene he just saw in the air was really too shocking for Xia Xingchen, and at the same time he had an ominous premonition in his heart. Xingchen, why do you look so ugly? What happened? Popovich walked over and asked softly. Old man, the situation is a little bad. Xia Xingchen looked at the distant horizon, where tens of thousands of mechanical beasts were ready to move. He told Popovich his discovery truthfully. With Popovich's knowledge and experience, he immediately felt the danger, and his white brows were tightly frowned. You mean, Athena sent almost all of its troops, even gave up the human army on the 13th satellite, and all came to deal with us? This is not in line with common sense. Xia Xingchen was silent for a full minute, and then slowly said, it is indeed not in line with common sense. However, based on my understanding of artificial intelligence, Athena will never be blinded by anger. There must be a reason why she did this. What reason? Popovich couldn't figure it out for a while. Attention. Xia Xingchen uttered 2 words faintly. I still don't understand. Popovich shook his head, his old face full of confusion. He suddenly felt that he couldn't understand Xia Xingchen. Xia Xingchen was obviously a young man who was just 20 years old. Popovich had also seen people of the same age as him. Those people's immature faces were full of frivolity and arrogance. However, Xia Xingchen gave people the feeling of being mature, stable, and thoughtful. When communicating with Xia Xingchen, Popovich did not regard him as a junior, but as a friend. Athena attaches importance to us and thinks we are the biggest threat, so she sent a large army to besiege us. As for the human mecha army on the 13th satellite, it is not worth mentioning in Athena's eyes. As for the reason, I don't know. Xia Xingchen shook his head and showed a bitter smile on his face. What should we do now? Break through as soon as possible and meet up with the human army? Yang Yao stood aside and heard the conversation between Xia Xingchen and Popovich. Although he didn't understand it very well, he felt confused. However, Yang Yao understood that they were in extreme danger. Break out. Xia Xingchen was silent again, his lips tightly pursed. Xia Xingchen was not careless. He could not calculate the success probability of the breakout through data. He could only rely on his feelings to estimate. This feeling is the mysterious sixth sense of human beings. Carlos and other artificial intelligence do not have the perception ability. Some people's sixth sense is very accurate and can even predict the future. At this moment, Xia Xingchen had a strong feeling that if he led these mecha divisions to break out, the result would be annihilation. No, can't break out. In the end, Xia Xingchen decided to trust his feelings. He shook his head, his eyes were determined, and ordered, everyone abandon the ground and retreat to the underground warehouse. We will defend there. Hearing Xia Xingchen's order, everyone present showed surprise on their faces. Countless eyes instantly gathered on Xia Xingchen's figure. Xia Xingchen was the leader of these people at the moment, and any of his orders could determine the life and death of these people. However, Xia Xingchen asked everyone to retreat to the underground warehouse for defense, which was not a good move in the eyes of anyone. Colonel, instead of passively defending, it is better to take the initiative to attack. Although the underground warehouse is a good shelter, the place is too narrow, and our mechas are too big to be deployed at all. There are so many mechanical beasts, and they are still being produced. What's the point of us hiding underground? The army of mechanical beasts is like the sea, and sooner or later they will drown us. This is a dead end. Unwise, too unwise. The mecha master said that they did not understand Xia Xingchen's order. Not only did they raise objections, but some people came up and tried to argue with Xia Xingchen and try to convince him. Enough. Xia Xingchen suddenly made a thunderous voice. His face was extremely cold, with a strong sense of oppression on his body, and his eyes swept across the faces of everyone present. The whole audience suddenly became silent. Everyone was silent, looking at Xia Xingchen with an angry face in surprise. They didn't expect that this young man who looked gentle and refined could have such a tyrannical side. This is war. Each of you is a soldier. Soldiers don't need their own ideas, they just need to obey the orders of their superiors. And I'm your highest superior. Even if I tell you to die, you can only obey orders obediently. Xia Xingchen roared loudly. Colonel, of course we will obey your orders. Everyone present is a real man, no one is afraid of death. Don't you agree? Gao Yangyao stood up, still looking a little unconvinced. That's right. We are not afraid of death. Everyone shouted. Colonel, you also see our morale. We are all powerful men. We don't want to suffocate to death underground. We are eager to fight. Isn't it just a mechanical army? Colonel, please allow us to fight to the death with these mechanical bastards. Gao Yangyao's face was full of incomparable fanaticism. Fight to the death. Xia Xingchen smiled bitterly and shook his head slightly. Only new recruits would say such words. War is not a good thing. For veteran soldiers who have experienced hundreds of battles, they are not afraid of war, but they definitely don't like war. Xia Xingchen deeply understands what it means to be difficult to lead new recruits. It is impossible to eliminate the gap in combat power between the enemy and us by relying solely on momentum and determination. There is no room for negotiation. Soldiers, you are not qualified to question my decision. Xia Xingchen knew very well that it was absolutely impossible to reason with these recruits who were overwhelmed by their passion. He could only use iron-blooded means to suppress the voices of opposition below. Xia Xingchen knew what he was doing. His purpose was not to kill as many mechanical beasts as possible and use the blood of soldiers to show off his military exploits. He just wanted everyone to leave alive. Yes, Colonel. Although they were unwilling to accept it in their hearts, this was a battlefield, and their lives were saved by Xia Xingchen. They could only choose to obey. Most of the Mecha division's mechas were still in the underground warehouse, and had not been driven out. Therefore, 10 minutes later, Xia Xingchen had led all the Mecha divisions to retreat to the underground bunker. Not long after, the mechanical beasts, like half of the seawater, surged up and occupied the entire area. Through the surveillance cameras left on the surface, Xia Xingchen discovered that dozens of mechanical beasts were moving the huge ice block that the Kanglang Mecha had transformed into like ants and disappeared. Chapter 821 Hercules. The Mecha beasts were like locusts, eating up all the steel products in the entire area. At the turn of day and night on satellite number 3, they launched an attack on the underground warehouse. The entrance to the underground warehouse was too narrow, and only 10 mecha beasts could rush in at a time. Xia Xingchen had already divided the mecha masters into 2 groups, relying on the terrain advantage to defend. At the front were Yangyao and William. Yangao's glory mecha was in Popovich's hands. He drove a modified model with similar performance to glory. Yangyao was eager to fight, so he arranged himself to be the first. William's thoughts were similar to Yangao's. He wanted to show off in front of Xia Xingchen. After all, he had betrayed before. Now he was considered to be making meritorious contributions to his crime, and wanted to use his military exploits to wash away the shame. However, neither Yangyao nor William expected that the mecha beasts this time were extremely ferocious, and had extremely strong combat capabilities. After crushing 20 mecha beasts, Yangyao was careless and his right leg was bitten by a mecha beast that was broken into 2 pieces, and he fell to the ground. William wanted to rescue, but he was also besieged by 7 mecha beasts. He was attacked from both sides and his mecha was severely damaged. Oops. Yangyao was in despair. He realized now that he had underestimated these mecha beasts. The price of despising was his own life. Just as Yangao's mecha was torn apart by the mecha beasts, a tall figure rushed out from behind. It was Lester who was driving the King Kong. Xia Xingchen had arranged Lester to support Yangyao from behind. Seeing that Yangyao was defeated, Lester immediately rushed out with a roar. The power of the King Kong mecha was amazing, like an angry gorilla, instantly dispersing hundreds of mecha beasts. Every time King Khan's iron fist hit, it would smash the mecha beast into a discus. With a sweep of his legs, more than a dozen mecha beasts flew up like chaff. With the power of Lester alone, the attack of the mecha beasts was repelled, and they hurriedly withdrew from the passage. Lester, don't fight. Come back immediately. Be careful of being besieged by the enemy. Xia Xingchen knew that Athena was testing the underground bunker. Xia Xingchen was very familiar with Carlos's behavior pattern. If it was Carlos, he would definitely make a feint attack to collect intelligence first, and only after data analysis would he launch a large-scale attack. Carlos would do this, and Athena, who is also an artificial intelligence, would definitely do the same. Lester is a very measured person, although he is very violent when fighting. However, he knows very well that it is not advisable to chase the desperate enemy. After driving the mecha beast group out of the passage, Lester did not chase them out, but guarded the entrance. Taking this opportunity, Xia Xingchen immediately summoned the mecha divisions and held a combat meeting. As Xia Xingchen expected, the behavior patterns of the recruits were the same. Before fighting with a powerful enemy, despise the enemy. After seeing the enemy's combat effectiveness, they began to despise themselves. The meeting hall was gloomy and everyone lowered their heads, with panic on their faces. Xia Xingchen said a few words of comfort, but found that there was no effect. It is not enough to restore the confidence of the soldiers with just a few words. However, Xia Xingchen was not worried. A desperate army will win, and the desperate situation will be destroyed. At this moment, he and these mecha masters were in a desperate situation, and the atmosphere of despair spread wantonly in the air. Xia Xingchen did not mean to stop it, because despair is also a kind of power. The mecha beasts passed through the crisscrossing pipes underground, and sent the Kanglang mecha, which had turned into a huge ice block, back to Athena. Athena sat on the high throne with a cold face, like a goddess. Saint Peter. Athena opened her red lips slightly, whispered in a low voice, and moved her fingers slightly. The computer dragon, that had long been covered by black vines, began to slowly wriggle below, extending two long black tentacles, extending to the ice block, and wrapping it around it like a python. Crack, crack, crack. A series of ice-breaking sounds. Even Lester's helpless ice, like a fragile eggshell, was shattered under the tentacles. The tentacles reached into the cockpit of the Kanglang mecha, and with extremely gentle movements, they dragged out the seriously injured Saint Peter. Saint Peter's injuries were very serious, and his internal organs were damaged. When he woke up from the frozen state, he coughed violently. In addition to blood, there were also broken organs in his mouth. Princess, please save me. Saint Peter felt his vitality quickly slipping away from his body. Knowing that he would not live long, he knelt in front of Athena and begged, "Your injuries are too severe, and I can't do anything. The human body is so fragile." Athena said lightly, "No, I don't want to die. I want revenge. I must kill Xia Xingchen." Saint Peter roared loudly, his face full of madness. "I can save you. I can also give you great power. But you need to pay a price." A light flashed in the depths of Athena's eyes. "Price? What price?" Saint Peter asked. "The human body is too fragile, and your body is already riddled with holes, and cannot be saved. I can take your brain out of your body and transplant it into its body." Athena smiled gently, and the black vines behind her slowly parted, revealing a huge robot that was 100 meters tall. The robot's shell was dark blue, and black vines like blood vessels were coiled all over its body. These vines gathered and coiled around its chest, turning into a strange vortex-shaped device, which should be its engine. A 100-meter tall robot is almost the same size as a medium-sized starship. The power of this terrifying war weapon can be imagined. The seriously injured Saint Peter was completely shocked. He was stunned for a long time, before he trembled and said, What on earth is this? I call it Hercules. The greatest hero in human mythology, the brave Hercules. It is also my creation. The most powerful war machine in human history. Athena thought about it, and retrieved a name that she was more satisfied with from the knowledge base. Is it a mecha? Saint Peter noticed that Athena did not use the word mecha. No. To be precise, it is not a mecha. Hercules is a combination of man and machine. A great existence beyond human beings. The steel body of the machine and the human brain, the combination of the two will bring incomparable power. Athena said. Brain, only the brain? St. Peter looked at the behemoth in front of him, and huge waves rolled in his heart. Only the brain. Moreover, once you become Hercules, it means that you have abandoned your human identity and become a life form higher than humans. Think about it, you can have infinite power, you can have a lifespan that exceeds that of humans. Athena's voice was full of temptation. St. Peter, come on. Abandon the fragile human body, abandon your broken body. Go and become a higher life. Chapter 822 Virus. Goddess. I do. St. Peter's eyes lit up as he knelt in front of Athena. Not only because of Athena's beauty, but also because of her powerful strength. St. Peter was completely bewitched and conquered by Athena, and was even willing to abandon his human identity and merge with this huge steel body. After getting St. Peter's permission, the black vines coiled around again and tightly wrapped around his body. St. Peter's entire body seemed to be covered by a layer of black gel. Although the vines kept squirming and squeezing, blood flowed down the vines, and St. Peter let out an uncontrollable wail. He felt that his body was slowly melting and disappearing without a trace. Skin, muscles, nerves, bones. In a few minutes, St. Peter was left with only a brain, covered with black gel and trembling slightly. Athena came over in person, held St. Peter's black brain in her white jade hands, and her body slowly floated up to the head of the giant robot Hercules. The head opened, and the cranial cavity was filled with boiling green liquid. St. Peter, these nutrients will stimulate your brain and make your mental power stronger, enough to control this huge steel body. Athena said as she carefully placed St. Peter's brain on a pedestal in the cranial cavity. The green liquid slowly floated up, submerging the black brain and completely sealing the cranial cavity. Boom boom boom. A dull sound like thunder suddenly rang out from Hercules' mouth. This sound was full of joy. St. Peter felt very comfortable soaking in the green nutrient solution. He had never experienced such joy. On the pedestal, the brain covered by the black gel also expanded rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. Human intelligence depends on the surface area of the cerebral cortex. The larger the surface area, the smarter the person. St. Peter's brain expanded 10 times. Although it was not enough to occupy the entire cranial cavity of Hercules, it was amazing to grow to this extent in a short period of time. Great. I feel very strong. And smarter. Hercules laughed like thunder. Of course. Because you are my creation. A perfect creation. Athena smiled gently. She was also very satisfied with St. Peter's success. Hercules began to move slowly under St. Peter's control. It was completely different from the feeling of controlling a mecha. Even if it was a mecha equipped with a mental force sensing device, the mecha master felt like he was manipulating it. It was no different from driving a car. However, St. Peter clearly felt that Hercules was himself, and he was Hercules. The machine and the human were perfectly integrated together. Master. Hercules' 100-meter body slowly knelt in front of Athena, and the title had changed from princess to master. St. Peter knew very well that from now on, there would be no St. Peter in the world. There would only be Hercules, Athena's creation. Master. Please allow me to fight for you. Hercules said loudly. He couldn't wait to grind the hateful Xia Xingchen into a pulp. Don't worry. Athena smiled slightly. Master, Xia Xingchen is very cunning. And behind him, there are human armies. Hercules argued. The human army is just a group of tiny ants. Athena smiled gently and triggered a program she had buried long ago. A strong wave spread out to the universe with Lubenstar as the center. The whole world was changed in an instant. Vidastar is an important agricultural production base of the Galactic Empire. The soil of the planet is rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which is conducive to plant growth. The entire surface of the planet is covered with dense green. Genetically modified crops are growing wildly with the help of sufficient light, water, and fertilizer. Hundreds of agricultural mechas are harvesting the newly mature wheat on the vast farmland. Haha, this batch of new agricultural mechas from Lubenstar have really good performance. The big farmer Vida drove the agricultural mecha and laughed. In fact, the entire Vidastar is his private property. Relying on large agricultural mechas, his family of less than 200 people can cultivate the farmland of the entire Vida planet. Yes, sir. A tenant smiled flatteringly. However, at this time, all the agricultural mechas stopped running at the same time. All parts showed normal operation, except for the optical computers on the mechas that crashed. Vida immediately called the mecha repairman Neil. After a series of inspections, Neil helplessly said that there was a problem with the optical computers of this batch of mechas. It might be due to the design. They must be returned to the factory for repair and replacement. What? Vida was immediately furious. Return to the factory? Return all these mechas to Lubenstar? Are you kidding? Did you see the wheat in the farmland? Their growth cycle is only 7 days. Within 7 days, I have to sow, weed, fertilize, and harvest. Do you know that during the return to the factory, these wheat will rot in the farmland? How much money will I lose? Regarding Vida's anger, the repairman Neil was helpless and could only report the situation to the Mecha Repair Association. The Mecha Repairer Association on Chang'an Star is now in a mess. Countless complaints have been made, complaining that the mecha's optical computer has crashed and cannot operate normally. Agriculture, mining, animal husbandry, construction. Not only military, mecha has been involved in all areas of human life and has become an indispensable part. At the same time, the mecha's optical computer crashed, and the losses caused were incalculable. At least they could not be measured in money. After investigation, the Mecha Repairer Association found that all these faulty mechas were produced from Lubenstar at a certain time period a few months ago. These mechas have different manufacturers, models, and functions. But the cause of the failure is the same. The optical computer crashed. So some people suspected that the factory on Lubenstar was hacked and a virus program was implanted in the optical computers of these mechas that have not yet been produced, causing the optical computers to crash. However, even the top hackers in the world cannot find and crack this virus program from the mecha optical computer. If you want the mecha to resume normal operation, you can only replace the optical computer. Fortunately, the mechas that had problems were only recently produced by Lubenstar, and the number was not large. They could be temporarily replaced by old mechas, and the losses were quickly contained. Except for one area, the military. The losses caused by the crash of the optical computer to the military field cannot be compensated. This is Athena's trump card, and it is also a fatal blow to the Galactic Empire. After Athena sneaked into Lubenstar, relying on her powerful ability, she quickly controlled the entire network of Lubenstar. However, Athena did not act rashly, but lurked for several months. During this time, Athena implanted a virus program into the optical computer of the mecha. This virus program will not spread, only in this way will it not be discovered by humans. Athena is not like human hackers who like to create chaos and play the role of God in the virtual space. She herself is God. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 823 Human Dignity. She only needs to launch a fatal blow to the Galactic Empire at the right time. In fact, Athena did it. Lubenstar number 13 satellite. Lieutenant Colonel Barr led nearly 1,000 mechas to guard the entrance of the space tunnel. Lieutenant Colonel Barr was in a good mood. He had repelled more than a dozen attacks from the mechanical army. Of course, Barr knew very well that this was all thanks to Xia Xingchen. If Xia Xingchen had not brought the gods gold and given the mecha divisions courage, they would not have been able to hold on until now. Lieutenant Colonel Barr spoke to General von Klorsch through the communicator and was told that reinforcement were about to arrive at Lubenstar. The reinforcement that came included the large starship Saxony under the command of Princess Crossing, the large starship Temple under the command of Princess Yu, and the Royal Guardian of Emperor Qin Zhi. The Royal Guardian is not a large starship, but a space aircraft carrier that is 10,000 meters long. There are 2,000 mechas on the Royal Guardian alone. The mecha divisions are elites selected from all over the Galactic Empire and are the Emperor's private army. The combat effectiveness is top-notch in the entire galaxy. Lieutenant Colonel Barr was relieved. As long as the reinforcement arrived, they would be able to easily suppress the robot riot on Lubenstar. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Barr only needed to hold on and wait quietly for the arrival of reinforcement. It doesn't seem difficult. Lieutenant Colonel Barr's eyes swept over the mecha divisions resting on the battlefield. Some of them might be new recruits, but the impulse had disappeared from their faces, replaced by a resolute look. The war made them grow rapidly, from new recruits to qualified soldiers. Commanding these soldiers, Lieutenant Colonel Barr believed that he would be able to complete the task. However, the war did not go as Barr expected. 2 hours after the last attack, the mechanical army launched another attack. The number of mechanical armies was not large, and they were basically all mechanical beasts that were good at close combat. Because they did not understand the performance of mechanical beasts, the human army suffered a little loss at the beginning. Lieutenant Colonel Barr immediately reacted and equipped each mecha with a laser rifle and a God's Gold shield to use long-range attacks to deal with the mechanical beasts. This method of fighting was very effective. The mechanical beasts were torn into pieces by the boiling energy flow before they even rushed up. No matter how many mechanical beasts there were, they could not cope with the laser cannon volleys of the mecha. This time, seeing these fearless mechanical debris rushing up, Lieutenant Colonel Barr methodically arranged the mecha divisions into battle formations, ready to follow suit and resist the attack of the mechanical army. Just before firing, something unexpected happened. The optical brain of each mecha fell into a dead state. The entire cockpit was flashing with red light indicating a malfunction. The mecha optical brain exists to assist the mecha division in operation. It includes many functions such as aiming assistance, detection, and communication, which is equivalent to the ears and eyes of the mecha. Of course, without the mecha optical brain, a skilled mecha division can still operate the mecha. However, the mecha division must observe the situation with the naked eye. The human eye has a very narrow field of vision and a limited distance. Moreover, without the assistance of the optical brain, shooting with a laser rifle has become an extremely difficult task. Without the optical brain, the mecha lost its ears, eyes, and weapons. Of course, the most fatal thing was the panic caused by the crash of the optical brain. Faced with the mechanical beasts that pounced on them, the mecha master could only pull the trigger in vain and shoot the laser beam, based on his feeling. The mechanical beasts were very flexible, and this random shooting could not hit them accurately. The army of mechanical beasts pounced on them, and instantly tore through the human front. In less than 10 minutes, humans were completely defeated. This was not a war at all, but a massacre. Lieutenant Colonel Barr saw the mechas being pounced on by mechanical beasts one by one, and the mecha masters were killed with wailing. His eyes were red, and he smashed hard on the command platform, but he was helpless. Without the optical brain, even the communicator could not be used. Lieutenant Colonel Barr could not even convey orders, and could only command the army by shouting at the top of his lungs. However, his voice was completely drowned out by the rumbling explosion. It's over. It's all over. Looking at the wreckage of the mecha and the bloody and fleshy pieces on the ground, Lieutenant Colonel Barr knew that the Luban 13 satellite had been lost. He didn't even know what happened. Why did all the mecha-like computers freeze in an instant? Lieutenant Colonel Barr's chest seemed to be stuffed with a piece of burning charcoal. His cheeks were burning, and blood kept coming up. He reached out and touched it, and his hands were full of tears. I don't know when Lieutenant Colonel Barr was already in tears. He looked blankly at his subordinates fighting on their own without any rules. The defense line was torn into pieces by the mechanical beasts. There was gunpowder everywhere, blood all over the ground, and his heart was empty. I'm sorry, General. I failed your hope. Lieutenant Colonel Barr stood up suddenly and saluted in the direction of the space station in the sky. Then, he resolutely got into the cockpit and pressed a hidden button on the control desk. Boom. In the violent flash, Lieutenant Colonel Barr and his mecha turned into a mushroom cloud. The huge explosion turned the mechanical beasts within 100 meters around him into ashes. The powerful shock wave blew away all the mechanical beasts within 1,000 meters. Lieutenant Colonel Barr defended his own and human dignity by self-destructing. Lieutenant Colonel Barr. The surviving mecha division saw this scene. Their eyes were red, and they cried loudly. Then, they all understood what they should do in an instant. In a blink of an eye, mushroom clouds rose on the battlefield. The mechanical beast army was severely damaged, and then began a crazy retreat. However, it was too late. Lieutenant Colonel Barr and his army, at the cost of their lives, curbed the attack of the mechanical army. From the space station, General von Klausch could clearly see everything that happened on satellite number 13 with his naked eyes. This imperial general, known for his iron blood, took off his military cap and held it in his hands. His body trembled involuntarily, and tears fell in strings. Chapter 824, Battle of Brest. The fluctuations that were enough to cause a strong war continued to spread, surpassing the vast sea of stars and reaching the Baku starfield. Qin Yun, the regent and commander-in-chief of the Galactic Empire fleet, was undecided at this moment. He was in high spirits and was preparing to launch a large-scale battle in the Brest starfield. The Brest starfield is located in the southwest of the Baku starfield, with Brest as the center, and includes 7 planets. This starfield is very desolate. The planets are barren, there are no minerals, and the soil contains a lot of salt and alkali, and even crops cannot be grown. However, Emperor Nicholas the Great chose this place as the location for the battle. This emperor, who was known for his tyranny, not only invested all his troops in the desolate Brest starfield, he even left Siberia and came to the front line to personally command the battle. Both sides knew that the Brest battle would sound the clarion call for a decisive battle between the two sides. At this moment, Qin Yun was sitting in the expedition space carrier, holding a cup of freshly brewed strong tea, sitting on a chair, listening to the report of the female adjutant beside him. For this Brest-Litovsk battle, we will deploy a total of 35 million troops, 100,000 starships, and 1.2 million mechas. The female adjutant reported an astonishing number. These troops are already the limit of the Galactic Empire. Qin Yun smiled lightly. What about the traitor Nicholas? The female adjutant replied, the specific situation is not clear. But from the intelligence we have explored so far, the enemy has also come out in full force and invested all its troops in this battle. Nicholas even went to the front line to supervise the battle in person. The army is led by his most respected new General Vitus and Deputy Commander Wu Zetitu. Vitus? Wu Zetitu? Qin Yun sneered. 2 unknown people. I think Nicholas is dizzy and actually let 2 children be commanders. This battle is not a concern. The reason why Qin Yun is so confident is that, since he led the army to attack the north, he has never encountered any decent resistance. Legend has it that the soldiers in the north are brave, thirsty for blood, not afraid of life and death, and even have the title of a fighting nation. However, in Qin Yun's view, these people are cowards. Qin Yun immediately notified the female adjutant to prepare for a combat meeting and to set up a battle array in the Brest Star Zone. How to deploy an army of 100,000 starships is a big question. Even Qin Yun needs to discuss it seriously with his generals. Commander, the female adjutant suddenly said, a few days ago, I mentioned to you about the rebellion on Lubenstar. The Xia Star Military Department sent an urgent report again, asking us to send troops to support. The rebellion on Lubenstar? Qin Yun was slightly startled. After the female adjutant reminded him, he remembered that there was such a thing. But Qin Yun had long forgotten about it. What? A small rebellion, and von Klausch hasn't put it down yet. What does he do for a living? Qin Yun was furious and slammed the cup heavily on the table. The generals present were silent, and no one dared to breathe. Forget it. It's just a small matter. There's no need to distract me. Let von Klausch figure it out himself. Qin Yun waved his hand and said, Commander, that's Lubenstar, our military factory. A general whispered, if there's a problem there, we won't be able to supply the subsequent mechas and starships. Don't say it anymore. We don't have time to take care of this right now. As for logistics, as long as we win the Battle of Brest, we can be unstoppable and go straight to the Yellow Dragon and kill Siberia Star. We don't need any logistics at all. Besides, didn't Lubenstar just deliver a batch of spare mechas and starships a few days ago? Qin Yun was still full of confidence. Qin Yun's stubbornness was well known to the generals present. They knew that it would be useless to continue talking, and it would only make Qin Yun annoyed with himself. So they all chose to shut up. Of course, the most important reason was that these generals also believed that they would never lose this battle. The atmosphere of the military meeting of the Galactic Empire was very relaxed, and all the generals had relaxed and comfortable smiles on their faces. In the outer atmosphere of Brest, the atmosphere on the Tsar space carrier was extremely heavy. Emperor Nicholas the Great sat on one side of the table, his face as gloomy as water. On the other side of the table, all the generals from the north were present, and they lowered their heads, not daring to look up at the face of Emperor Nicholas the Great. Vitus, tell me, what is our chance of winning the Battle of Brest? Nicholas looked at the young Vitus. Your Majesty, our chance of winning is less than 10%. The handsome Vitus cleared his throat and answered truthfully. Even if I lead the army in person, the chance of winning is only 10%. Nicholas frowned. It is because your Majesty personally went to the Brest front and boosted morale that we have a 10% chance of winning. Vitus whispered. Forget it, Yuri. Nicholas waved his hand in annoyance and habitually called Yuri's name, wanting to ask for information about the enemy, but he realized that Yuri was no longer around when he just said it. Your Majesty, according to reliable intelligence, Yuri died on Manastar in Chang'an Star region. Xia Xingchen killed him personally. Yuri's former deputy Gogol took over his previous position and whispered, Yuri, dead. Nicholas's face suddenly changed, and he stood up suddenly and asked, where is Athena? Where is my princess? Is there any news about her? Your Majesty, not yet. But according to my subordinate's speculation, it is estimated that Princess Athena is also in danger. After all, the opponent is Xia Xingchen. Gogol said. Xia Xingchen. Xia Xingchen again. All my good things will be ruined in his hands. Nicholas sat heavily on the chair, his face as hen. Nicholas was not shaken by the news of Yuri's death. To him, Yuri was just a useful subordinate, not irreplaceable. However, Athena is irreplaceable. Moreover, Nicholas knows that Athena is the only chance of victory. If even her action fails, the Battle of Brest-Litovsk will surely be lost. A cloud of sorrow shrouded the entire ship. In order to prevent this negative emotion from spreading, Nicholas chose to adjourn the meeting and let the generals go back to formulate a battle plan. Returning to his room, Nicholas first took some angels of bliss. Since Athena left, Nicholas has often been in a manic state, with great anxiety in his heart and difficulty concentrating. He can only use this psychedelic drug to calm himself down. Your Majesty, this psychedelic drug is not a good thing. It will damage your brain nerves. Moreover, if your men know that you are taking drugs, I'm afraid their confidence will be shaken. A man in a black robe appeared behind Nicholas at some point. Chapter 825 The War Begins. Lord God's Messenger. Nicholas was startled and stood up quickly, his forehead covered with cold sweat. After the celestial being left, he sent this mysterious messenger over, not only to take away Andrei's body, but also to guarantee that he will be resurrected within 3 years. Moreover, in a very short period of time, he preached on hundreds of planets in the north, and established a church called Shinran religion. The doctrine of Shinran religion is not much different from the Christianity widely spread in the Northern Empire. It just preaches that Shinran is actually God. Let the believers be kind, grateful, and worship Shinran, and they can be blessed. The most devout believers even have the opportunity to become God's messenger or even Shinran. It is such a mysterious religion. With the strong support of Nicholas, it has sprung up like mushrooms after reigning just a few months. Churches are built on major planets, and even Christianity has been replaced. Nicholas does not know the inside story of Shinran religion. But Nicholas feels that Shinran religion is a complete cult. There is no reason, no evidence, just based on Nicholas's feeling. However, for the sake of victory, Nicholas was willing to become the devil's servant. My lord, you are right. But I feel uneasy. Nicholas, who was always arrogant, was very respectful in front of the God's messenger, like a child who had done something wrong. Your Majesty, you don't need to feel uneasy. The God's messenger smiled slightly. I have trained the Doomsday Catastrophe Suicide Squad for you. With them, you can at least delay until the moment when the miracle appears. The Suicide Squad has been trained? Nicholas was slightly startled, his face full of disbelief. Those unruly mecha masters, are they willing to sacrifice their lives for the Empire? My lord, what have you done? In order to win, Nicholas built a 5,000-man death squad, all of whom were driving doomsday catastrophe mechas. When the war situation was unfavorable, these death squad members would detonate the doomsday catastrophe mechas. Because the doomsday catastrophe was equipped with an unstable nuclear fission engine and all the nuclear explosion protection devices had been removed, the power of the self-detonation was very shocking. However, it was not easy to convince these death squad members to serve the Empire at the cost of their lives. Mecha divisions have well-developed brains and higher IQs than ordinary people, so the policy of keeping the people ignorant does not work very well on them. Moreover, Nicholas was doing things against the grain, and his reputation was not very good, whether in the civilian or military circles. He could not gain the loyalty of everyone, and this very difficult task was taken over directly by the black-robed messenger of God, and in less than 3 days, he told Nicholas that all the death squad members were willing to defend the dignity of the Northern Empire with their lives. This was really abnormal. The body of the envoy of God was hidden under the black robe, looking extremely mysterious. He smiled and said, "Your Majesty, I just asked them all to convert to the Shinran sect. They are willing to fight for the glory of the Lord." Nicholas shuddered involuntarily. "So, what is the miracle, Your Majesty? You will know when the time comes." The envoy of God blinked at Nicholas, and his figure slowly dissipated into the air. Nicholas shuddered again. He saw clearly, just now, that the pupils of this envoy of God were emitting golden light. They were 2 golden vertical pupils like snakes. 10 hours later, the fleet of the Northern Empire had just taken its position, and the battle formation had not yet been fully deployed. Qin Yun, with a proud smile on his face, sat on the space aircraft carrier, and his subordinates, whose number was enough to rival a city, were all waiting for his orders. Finally, the commander who controlled 100,000 starships finally stood up and swung his right hand down in the air. Attack. More than 1,000,000 plasma cannons threw out swords of light in an instant. The hatches of the starships opened, and millions of mechas flew out, emitting light from behind, and rushed towards the enemy's positions. The entire Brest Star region was immersed in artillery fire. Against the backdrop of the void of the universe, it was like a huge, brilliant gem. The light of the stars behind it was eclipsed at this moment. Nicholas was not caught off guard. In fact, he had already arranged for Wuzatu to deploy defenses. Wuzatu became famous for his defense, and among the generals of the empire, he was nicknamed Iron Wall. In the face of Qin Yun's fierce attack, Wuzatu methodically launched a counterattack. The armies of both sides engaged in a melee in the Brest Star region. The artillery fire from both sides went back and forth, completely lighting up the dark universe. Countless mechas were interspersed back and forth, dazzling, and mechas were constantly destroyed. Violent explosions occurred, and mecha divisions were buried in the sea of stars. The power of an individual seems insignificant at this moment. Even the huge starships did not have the ability to change the situation. The only thing that could determine victory or defeat was which side had the superior force. There was no doubt that the army of the Galactic Empire had a firm advantage in both quantity and quality. A few hours later, the army in the north began to show signs of fatigue, and the troops began to run out of strength, and the signs of defeat began to emerge. Nicholas was anxious. Although he knew that now was not the best time, he did not want to wait any longer, and ordered 5,000 mecha divisions of the Doomsday Catastrophe Suicide Squad to join the battle. 5,000 mechas were originally insignificant in a battle of this level. However, the powerful performance of the Doomsday Catastrophe and the bravery shown by the mecha divisions actually turned the tide of the battle. The mecha group of the Doomsday Catastrophe inserted into the battlefield from the left, using the laser cannons on their shoulders to fire a volley, creating a rain of light, and instantly tore a small gap in Qin Yun's defense line. Qin Yun also discovered the existence of this team, and immediately turned the muzzle of the gun to stop the advance of the Suicide Squad. However, a dozen mech operators had already rushed up in Doomsday Havoc. After being hit by the laser, they still rushed into the starship group and detonated the mech. The Doomsday Havoc mech immediately turned into a ball of fire. After expanding, it shone brightly, like a tiny star, but soon dissipated silently. The mech operators and mechas turned into cosmic dust in the light and heat. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.